My name is Tom Hill. I'll be chairing our meeting today. And before the meeting begins, I'd like to ask everybody to make sure that any mobile devices they have are switched to silent mode. And I'd also like to advise that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Township of Georgian Bay website. You can also watch it after it'll be recorded and posted on the website as well. So with that in mind, we have a number of microphones that are spread throughout the room, and including a microphone and camera that is mounted over the gallery area. So I would ask you that if you have any conversations, either keep them very light or you may want to step outside, because we don't want to interfere with the vocal recording of the meeting itself. So this morning we have a public meeting scheduled for one consent application and 7 minor variances. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be used for the meeting. First, the Secretary-Treasurer will advise the committee as to when, how, and to whom notice of these applications has been sent. Next, each of the applications will be considered separately. Our planning staff will advise the purpose and effect of the applications and provide any other information that is relevant. The Secretary-Treasurer will advise of any correspondence that has been received for that application. And from there, the applicant may make a brief presentation if they so choose. And also the public will have an opportunity to comment on the application being considered. After the public forum, the committee will then deliberate on the proposed application and consider a motion to either pass, defeat, or defer the decision for the applications. So the consent application this morning is a joint one for several applications. It is number B19-07 through 10. And that is for 24 Wolverine Beach Road. The minor variance applications being considered this morning are A19-20 for 36 Beech Avenue in Mactier, A19-30 for 1832 6 Mile Lakeshore, A19-32 for 8838 Go Home Lakeshore, A19-32 for 2 Island 1660 and Georgian Bay, A19-34 for 139 Big Rock Road, A19-35 for 93 Woodland Trail, and finally A19-36 for 74 Transcanada Bay Road. Before we begin, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest on the part of the members?
Mr. Chairman, I am referring to application A19-30 in the names of Mr. Clarke and his wife, Mrs. Hempstead. While I have no fiduciary interest in this application, the applicants have been personal family friends for several years, and in order to avoid any potential conflict of interest, I will recluse myself when this application comes before the committee.
Thank you. Any other pecuniary interest? Okay. Seeing none, we will proceed. Of course. We will proceed to our Secretary-Treasurer for information relative to notices of these applications.
Thank you, Chair. Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each of the notices was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Our first application today is a consent application. And as I mentioned, it'll be a joint application for numbers B19-07 through 10. And it is for 24 Wolverine Beach Road in Honey Harbor. To the planner, please.
Right, good morning. The first consent application is 4 applications for McConnell, and Celeste Phillips is acting as the agent for 24 Wolverine Beach Road, which is in Honey Harbor. The application is to relocate an existing right-of-way, and the right-of-way provides access to 243, 245, 247, and 249 Baxter Loop Road. Just to give you an overview of where the subject location is, it's shown on the screen in black. So it's an irregular shaped parcel. It is zoned, the retained lands, which is the lands shown in black, is zoned shoreline residential type 1, exception 25. And all of the benefiting lands, so the 4 that have legal deeded access over the right-of-way, are all zoned shoreline residential type 1, and they're all designated waterfront within the Honey Harbor coastal waterfront community. I'll just give you an aerial view of the subject lands, and you can see that existing right-of-way. So it comes across here on an angle across the retained parcel. So there are 4 properties that have legal deeded access, so I'm just going to show you each one of those. So on the screen here, you have the existing right-of-way, and in red has the existing driveways. So the blue is the benefiting lands, and the yellow is where they're proposing to relocate the right-of-way. So it would be directly along the property line to allow them to regain access and use of Part 2 that is shown on the screen there. So currently, this is for this subject lands at 243 Baxter Loop and 247 Baxter Loop. So the right-of-way would stay in the same location, but just to show you where each of the benefiting lands are. And this is 249 Baxter Loop and 245. Some site photos. So this is the access to Wolverine Beach Road. So this is where the retained parcel accesses their property. So they go down Wolverine Beach Road, and it is a long road down to their access point off of it. And this is the existing right-of-way. And the general area of the proposed relocation of the right-of-way. And then just looking down Baxter Loop. And another view down the other way down Baxter Loop Road towards Wolverine Beach. So the official plan states that roads should be appropriate, and the right-of-way can be permitted provided there are no new lots being created, and the application is not proposing any new lots. So first, the application is required to determine if the proposed relocation of the right-of-way is in the most appropriate location. Several letters which have been circulated to the committee have been received from the abutting landowners and those that use the current right-of-way, opposed to the relocation of the right-of-way. Further consultation should be had with those who have deeded access, and staff recommend that the application be deferred for further review and consultation. So the agent is present, and if you have any questions for herself or if you have any questions for me, we're happy to answer those.
Thank you, Dana. The applicant is present. I just might add, as I mentioned earlier, the meeting is being recorded, so if you are addressing the committee, please come up to the table. There's on that device, there's a little button that you push, and it will illuminate to let you know that it's working. And if you would please identify yourself with your full name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. My name is Celeste Phillips. I'm a land use planning consultant. I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property, Rochelle McConnell. My address is 300-85 Bayfield Street, Barrie, Ontario, L4M3A7. And Kurt, do you want to introduce
Chairman, my name is also, it's Kurt Wool. I'm also a resident of Honey Harbor, 42 Brady's Island Road, Honey Harbor, Ontario.
Thank you. All right, do you have a presentation?
I think Dana's done a great job. On the drawing that, maybe if we could put the reference plan back up again. Everything that's outlined in green on that drawing is owned by the McConnells. So you see the very top, well, there's two triangles at the top. One, the very top is also owned by McConnells. That's right. And then the one that's identified as Part 2 is owned by the McConnells, and the right-of-way crosses through there that separates Part 2 from Part 4. So the owner wishes to relocate the easement, as has been suggested, to the location in yellow. Not only does it allow the McConnells to use that part of their property, but it also provides a safer access. Right now, the access is at about a 36-degree angle to the road. So the allowance for the relocation would create a safer access for these properties. We do understand that you have correspondence from 3 of the 4 neighbors who have expressed concern about the relocation, and we understand that the recommendation today is for a deferral.
Thank you very much. Did you have a comment, sir, that you'd like to make?
No, he's fine.
No comment at this time. I think Celeste has pretty much covered it. It's just, we've got it open on the table now. We're looking, now that we have the comments from the neighbors, we're just looking to see if we can come up with a solution that works for everybody. If the right-of-way needs to be shifted a little bit one way or the other, widened to make things work, then we're willing to work with them. We're just looking to right-of-way.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this application? Okay. Seeing none, I'm sorry, I do see it. Would you please come forward to the microphone and identify yourself with your name and address, please?
Peter Flug, I'm at 243 Baxter Loop. Mine is that L-shaped property. And as it stands now, my road goes right to the, I would say, the east side of my property to hook up, and I don't see how I can hook up to the new right-of-way without a lot of renovation to my property, which I'm opposed to.
Would you mind just pointing out a little bit more closely which, oh, I see, you've highlighted in blue? All right.
Yeah, this is my property, and well, somebody's even drawn it in here. That's where mine comes out. I don't see how I'm gonna hook up to that nicely that big vehicles can get in.
And where is your cottage on that property? Down in there. Okay.
My father put that road in, and he took the path of least resistance, and I took him over there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this application? Okay. Seeing none and having reviewed the comments from both the planning department and from the applicant, it seems that we need more information here before we can proceed. I do appreciate everybody coming and making their comments known today. Just for the record, Madam Secretary, would you advise of any correspondence we received in this application?
Thank you, Chair. The District of Muskoka has no objections, and there were 8 letters of opposition received.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving forward, I have the feeling that we are in favor of deferral, as was recommended by the Town Planning Department. And I would ask at this point for an indication.
Can we continue through some questions of clarity on this?
before we move to the deferral? Is this something that you would rather do now than after the next meeting?
I think it would help.
Okay, I think it would help. Then, having closed the public meeting, I'll bring this before the committee, and let's have any questions from the committee members, starting with Member Bochek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are directed toward the planning department. Maybe anyone from the planning department can chime in on this. Obviously, there is a concern from the neighbors that are attached to that road. We seem to have got 8 letters of opposition. I don't know who would oppose it if they're not on the road, but that's to be sought out later. Is there an avenue through the planning department where it sounds to me like communication is an issue here, and perhaps the want and the need of this changing of the entrance and the path of the easement? To me, it makes a lot of sense that you've taken the path of least resistance, you've come straight in. It's a better exit egress to the road. The letters of opposition were not very specific as to why they oppose it, just that basically they oppose it. And I'm wondering if maybe there can be some sort of collective meeting set up with our planning department, the neighbors, and the person wanting to change this easement and get everything out on the table. I think this forum, why everybody's here today was to get everything out on the table and hear everyone's concerns, but with the deferral, that's not going to happen. So I'm just wondering if there's any avenue of a public meeting or a meeting where everybody can get together and express their concerns. Let's have it.
Through Mr. Chair, we can definitely speak with the applicant and the neighbors about that. Typically, this sort of a situation is a matter between the applicant, so the property owner, and then the individuals or the property owners that the easement is in favor of. So in this case, the people that are opposed to it. So typically they would sort that out on themselves and then come to the municipality with a solution. But if we can be of assistance in terms of facilitating a meeting, we could assist in any way possible. But our recommendation is that they get together and that they sort out a solution and come back to us. Ultimately, property owners do have an easement over the subject lands currently. So in order for that easement not to exist, the folks that currently have the legal access through that easement would have to agree for that easement to be dissolved in the future. So there does have to be a working together between all the parties. So I think that's going to happen as a result of this meeting.
Okay, I would agree, because I think just presenting the facts without any coloring, there could be great opportunities here for everyone, and not just changing the path of the easement, but making access better, making the road better, servicing everybody better. It may be at the cost of the applicant wanting the work done, but if everybody can benefit from it in the long run, I think a sit down, behind closed doors and have a good talk about this, whether the residents take it upon themselves to do that with the property owner, or if we can help out here at the township and get everybody together on this, I think it will go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
I just have a comment that it's very difficult for us to have any kind of contact with the property owner. I have been, my property's close to his, so I walk over to him. I go up the steps, I knock on the door, the dog is barking loudly. Mrs. McConnell, she is in full view of me, and she will not even acknowledge my presence. So getting to even talk to them is difficult.
okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members? Mr. Demke.
Just a comment regarding the correspondence. There seems to be something about the area that's proposed is quite swampy or underwater some of the time. To me, that really requires a look at the whole thing. They get together sounds like the right thing to do. That's the only comment I really had.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, just supplemental to my first comments. I did visit the site and took a look at it, and I mean, it is high ground, it is bare rock. There is some advantages to going that way, but I think everybody needs to get together and have a conversation about this. I agree with Bill that any way possible, if you're having trouble in the neighborhood getting together, that's why I thought maybe the township could help in facilitating a meeting where everybody gets together in the same room and has a good discussion on this, because I think talking it out will help a little bit. Maybe you can come up with some new ideas or some new paths or something to make this so everybody's happy down there. I think that's the key to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'll reflect that it seems to be an agreement on having a deferral on this application to allow time for the applicant to discuss this application with the people who currently hold the right-of-way in that property. And as Mr. Robinson mentioned, I think it's incumbent upon that person to get agreement from the current landowners that have right-of-way to agree to the new application. So I would ask for a motion for deferral on this application. And so moved by Member Ferguson, seconded by Member Matthews. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, so your application is deferred. It'll be up to the planning department to reschedule this application for a subsequent committee of adjustment meeting. All right. Our next application is application for minor adjustment, and it's application number A19-20 for 36 Beech Avenue in McTier. To the planner, please.
All right, so the first minor variance today is for 36 Beech Avenue, and the request is to recognize an existing deck attached to an existing cottage with a decreased setback from the interior side lot line of 0 meters and 1.3 meters, where 2 meters is permitted, pursuant to the residential type 4 zone. So a permit was issued in 2014 for a deck, and through the previous minor variance, so this property may look familiar to you. And through the previous minor variance, it was noted that the deck was not built as per the original approved plans. So the building staff did go out and do an inspection, and it was determined that it was not built as per the approved plans. So the owner has submitted a minor variance to recognize the deck as it currently exists. So the subject lands is shown on the screen. It is in Beech Avenue within the McTier Urban Center and zoned residential type 4. So it is accessed off of Beech Avenue, but through a private right-of-way. Just an overview of the subject lands. It is outlined in red, and you can see the neighboring properties. So on the screen here, these dark hatched portions are the portions of the deck that were not built as per the approved plans. And I do have a closer view just to make that easier for you to see. So as you can see here, this is the portion that was not built as per the approved plans on the south side, and on the north side, it is this portion here that juts out from the cottage. So the front yard setback, which I'll just show you on here, was permitted to be at 6 meters. That was the setback when the deck was issued the permit. So that setback into the front yard is fine. It is just the setbacks to the side lot lines. So a deck is permitted to encroach into your interior side lot line up to 1.2 meters. However, only if your deck is less than 1.2 meters in height, and this deck is not, so that is why it's not permitted, those encroachment rates. So the intent of the side yard setbacks are for buildings and structures to be appropriately set back from buildings and structures on abutting properties, and to ensure that there is privacy and the enjoyment of the waterfront area is protected. So just to give you some site photos, this is the existing deck. So it was the portion on the right over here that was expanded, and it is this front portion here. This is a view of that deck from the dock. So again, it is this portion on the left and the small portion on the right. So this is that area that was not built as per the approved plans on the front. So this is the existing deck. So a portion of the deck was permitted to go up to that 0 meter setback along the side lot line. That portion was replaced with a permit. And this is the deck at the rear of the cottage. So when you pull in from the driveway, and that portion was built as per the approved plans. So this is that bump out with that 1.2 meter setback on the north side. So that part was not built as per the approved plans. So the proposal is to further extend this deck along the interior side lot line into the front yard. The front yard setback at a distance of 6.5 meters. So while the deck and the interior side lot line is existing, this portion, staff do not support the extension of the deck into the front yard. The side yard setback within the front yard on the waterfront property is important for privacy, and staff have concerns with the reduction in the setback, which is further compounded by the height of the deck. So the application in its entirety does not meet the intent of the bylaw. However, staff are not opposed to the bump out on this portion of the deck remaining at that 1.2 meter setback. And we're not opposed to having a portion allowed for access so that they can come from the side of their deck and access the front. Otherwise, they would only be able to access the front of their deck through inside the existing cottage. So just to give you another view, so staff are not opposed to this portion remaining, which is on the north side, and allowing a walkway. So the minimum, they did the minimum based on building code, which was 0.9 meters. So staff are not opposed to them having that access. So the setback of 1.8 meters on that side. So the 9.7 square meters that's hashed would be removed. So there are two recommendations in front of you. It is either to deny the application in its entirety or approve the application based on the revised schedule. So this would be the revised schedule, allowing this portion to remain and having this portion removed, but with that access point to allow them to go from the side of the deck onto the front of the deck. I believe the applicant's agent is present if you have any questions for them or if you have any questions for myself.
Thank you, Dana. If the applicant's agent would like to come forward, identify yourself for the secretary, and provide us with any comments you may have.
Hi there, Lindsay Bruce from SMPL Design Studio. I don't have any additional comments, just to clarify that we did work with Dana and the planning staff to revise the schedule, and as you can see, it's there before you. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this application?
Yes, on the property beside Romeo.
Please come forward and identify yourself with your name and address for the secretary, please.
Hi, my name is Gregory Damon Stonner of 30 Beach, McTier, Ontario, POC 1HO. At 30 Beach, I'm on the top side here, if I can show you. Yeah, if you can go back. Okay, so my property is right here, and yes, that corner there, we didn't hear anything that was noted in the initial meetings for this deck, that the pins for the property line were underneath the deck running along here. This is what initially started my inquiry, was because the one side was over and they noted that the pins for the marking was about this much space, basically, of overhang. And then I found out that the corner was actually not supposed to be there later on. I was just wondering, is that being addressed at all, the space along the deck that's over?
Okay.
I can address that.
You want to comment on that, Dana?
Sure. So the building department has been out to the property and they noted that it was over, so that part has to be removed through the order to comply to bring that, the portion that extends over the property line back up to 0 meters. So the building department has let the owner know that that will have to be rectified.
Dana, can I ask you to go back to the picture that you presented earlier, just in reference to this gentleman's comment? Oh, no, the one that you just had up there, yes, that one.
Okay.
You had mentioned an alternate proposal, taking that corner out. Can you indicate on that drawing where the pins would be as this gentleman has identified?
They are just slightly under this portion. So when staff with the building department were out on site, we noticed that the pins were right under, about a foot or so underneath. So it was noted to the owner that they'll need to bring that back into compliance, whether or not their minor variance gets approved or denied. Their deck wasn't allowed to cross the property line, and the owner knows they need to bring that back in through the order to comply.
Okay.
One thing we would like to ask, and I just was explaining that to get it clear, there has been an offer made on my property. It's a substantial offer. I'm interested in if there's a possible chance of a deferral on this, so I could take a look at see what's available.
Is that offer made by the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to comment on this application? Okay, then seeing none, I will bring this application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Caddo.
I just find this guy's really pushing that envelope on everything, and I don't support this at all.
Member Bocek.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask a question of the neighbor. You said that you were looking possibly at a deferral because there was mention of a transaction between you and the applicant. If it's not prying too deep, is he offering to purchase a portion of your property?
All of it.
All of it. Okay, so not just a portion that would give
All
him
of
the proper setbacks. Okay, thank you very much. And in light of that, I would hate to make a judgment call on this or a ruling on this if there is another avenue that may be out there that will appease both parties. So if a deferral is suggested or requested, I would support that deferral at this time.
Thank you. Member Ferguson?
I agree that if there's a request for a deferral, and that's what the owner of the adjacent property would like, we should go for it. Otherwise, I don't support the application at all.
Member Cooper?
Yes, I concur with some of the other comments, and if there's a way of working this out, I don't know whether transactions really are part of our planning process. I'd like to have the planning department comment on that aspect, but I'm having difficulty with the rest of it. Thank you.
We'll come back to those questions if I may. I'll just get comments from the others. Member Demke?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've been a couple of times to the property, and I'm glad it was brought up about the pins under the deck, because even moving that in, would that not leave not much room to walk along? Like, well, how wide is the deck that's on that side, south side right now?
For you, Chair Hill, it is 1.84 meters. You want that in feet?
6 feet, so that would probably bring it down to 5 or 4 if they if that was part of what ended up happening, it's pretty narrow.
Yeah, it wasn't, the part that would need to be removed, I think, was on the outside of the railing, so it
Right.
wouldn't impact
Okay.
their access much.
If in fact the offer is something that's be considered, I'd go for a deferral. I certainly wouldn't support it the way it is.
Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whilst the idea of a deferral seems like a compromise, I think before us is, this doesn't comply with the bylaw. And correct me if I'm wrong, but even if the property was purchased by the applicant, it's still not going to be compliant with the bylaw. Would that be correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. I think, and we don't know if the applicant's requesting a deferral, the neighbor's requesting a deferral at this point. The applicant, we haven't heard that from the applicant yet, so that would be that would be helpful, I think, for the committee to know where they stand on the matter. If there's a purchase, however, it may result in a lot line adjustment or something else that may bring it further into compliance with the bylaw, and we'd be back considering a different variance. So if the applicant's amenable to a deferral to see what transpires with respect to a transaction, it may be appropriate, because this committee may be evaluating a different variance in the future, and possibly a consent application. It's the first that we've heard of it, but that's the potential scenario that might unfold.
Thank you. So I guess just further to your point, the applicant would have to request the deferral, not the neighbor?
Through Mr. Chair, it really doesn't matter. The committee has the opportunity to defer it as they choose, to defer, deny, or approve an application. But I think it would be helpful to know
Where
that stands.
Yes, I would agree with you, Mr. Robinson. So, yeah, I mean, I think if a deferral could happen, and therefore, ultimately, this application would be pulled, and there'd have to be a new application if the purchase went through in a realignment. Would that be correct, Mr. Robinson?
That's partially correct, yes. It could be an adjustment to the current application, but it all depends whether they do a lot line adjustment or what they decide to do to try to bring it into compliance with the bylaw. But at the end of the day, there's still an outstanding order on the property. There's a non-complying situation, so we'd want it remedied, and there being continued steps to remedy the existing non-complying situation.
Yeah, I guess that's the part that bothers me is the non-compliance, and this lot is very heavily covered with decks and buildings, and I don't know what the lot coverage is, and it probably doesn't really matter. It's pushed the envelope right to the limit, in my opinion. So if the applicant's in favor of a deferral, I would support that. Otherwise, I cannot support this application the way it stands.
Member Bocek?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It sounds to me the consensus of the committee is that this application is not going to fly, and that myself and by the sounds of it, no other member is willing to grant the application as it stands. So I don't know if we can hear from the applicant whether a deferral at this point is in favor, because if it is, I think that's the way the committee will move until the neighbors resolve their purchase. So my question to you is, if the applicant is here, the representative of the applicant can give us some indication whether they're willing to move into a deferral, because I think if you're not, this is going to be defeated, and that's my fear.
Can we hear from the applicant? Are you able to speak on behalf of the owner?
I can, he is here as well. But I do think that under the circumstances, I think a deferral is okay for us right now. I'd rather have a deferral and be able to modify the application once we sort out the issues. Yeah. So yes.
Well, if the applicant is here, could we have the applicant indicate their preference for a deferral at this point? Sir, you are the applicant. Could you identify yourself for the secretary, please?
Romeo Canizares. And I do agree with the deferral.
Okay, thank you very much. Then, I think we have an appetite for deferral here by all members. And if I could have a motion for deferral, Member Bocek, seconded by Member Demke. All those in favor? The application is deferred. Thank you very much for your input today. I think that was very valuable. Very well. Our next application is minor variance application number A19-30 for 1832 6 Mile Lakeshore. And as mentioned prior, Member Ferguson has recused himself. To the planner, please.
Right, so the application you have in front of you is for 1832 6 Mile Lakeshore. And the request is to permit the construction of a cottage and the demolition of their existing cottage with a front yard setback of 17.8 meters and 16.4 meters to the dwelling wall, where 20 meters is required, and a setback of 12.9 meters to the deck, where 16 meters is required, and the subject lands is Zone 6 Mile Lake Residential. Just an overview of the subject property. It's shown on the screen in black. So it is a water access only property, and it is designated waterfront within the 6 Mile Lake inland waterfront community. So as you can see, the subject lands on the screen in red. It is an irregular peninsula-shaped lot. Here is their proposed site plan. So I do have a zoomed in one, but I just wanted to show you the entire lot. So it does have a lot area of 9,751.5 square meters and 8,486 square meters within 60 meters of the high water mark, and a lot frontage of 97 meters. So on the screen in front of you, you can see the existing cottage is outlined in red. The proposed cottage is hashed in blue, and the existing deck is shown in yellow. And they do have an existing screen room or gazebo that is located 5 meters from the water. That is going to remain untouched. It's connected via deck. So they are proposing this new cottage in a similar footprint of the existing. However, they are expanding it towards the rear and along the side, and they are proposing to carry that deck in front along the front wall of that cottage. It will be reconstructed. So just some site photos. This is a view from the water, and the subject property is over here and on the right, and you can see the neighboring property on the left. Another view from the water, so that's that screen room there and the existing cottage. So you can see there is significant mature vegetation on the subject lands. So just a few more photos from the water. So this is the existing cottage. And another view of the existing cottage. So this is going around to the point of the property, and then around to the side where the docks are. And then another view from the water. And one last view from the water. So this is the front of the existing cottage and the location of the proposed. However, it will be expanded to the north of this photo. The existing setback is 15.5 meters. The orientation has changed slightly, but it's not going to expand any closer to the water. And it doesn't match the footprint exactly, so they're not expanding based on 411. It's a new cottage with the reduced front yard setback. So this is a view from that existing deck to the water. So there is a little location that is clear due to the existing bedrock. And a view from where that, not in addition, but I'm going to call it where the footprint is expanded to the side of that cottage. This is a view from there, so you can see it will be buffered from the vegetation. And then again, another view from where that cottage will be expanded along that existing footprint to the water. And then this is the existing front of the cottage and that screen room you can see there. And then looking at that existing deck, so that connecting deck between the screen room and the cottage towards the water. and a view in front of the shoreline looking towards the existing cottage. And the location of the addition will be expanded this way. So it is on the existing septic bed, however, they're going to decommission it and install a new septic system at a location that complies, but that is why that area is a bit clear. So that's that area that I was referring to. So that's where their existing septic is. So that's why it's all clear, and they're going to decommission it, install a new system that meets all setbacks and building code. So the intent of the front yard setback is to ensure setbacks are adequately, or structures are adequately set back from the shoreline, and to ensure the character of the area is protected, and to provide for an area of vegetation buffer between structures and the shoreline. So they did have the application was originally circulated to go at the previous month's meeting with a setback that was set back further than what it is proposed now. However, there was this rock outcropping after they went out and plotted everything out that they realized they would have to do some blasting. So then again is that rock. So they have set the cottage forward a little bit in order to avoid any blasting. So just another view of where that rock is, that would all have to be blasted if it went back to that setback that they had originally proposed. So rather than blasting and moving the mature vegetation, they simply push the cottage forward a little bit to avoid having to do that. So that's looking at the rear point of the cottage, of the property, sorry. So these are the proposed elevations. So that would be the rear and the south. This will be the wall that would face the water, the east elevation. So it does comply with the height requirements. And just to give you an idea of the floor plan, it is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath with a loft. So this portion is open. So the proposed dwelling is expanding the existing cottage in a similar location, and to the west, which is the rear, and to the south. The deck is being constructed on the existing footprint and expanded along the front wall of the cottage, to the south and slightly on the northern side of the cottage, just along this side here. So the cottage was relocated slightly in order to avoid blasting the rock that I had showed you at the rear of the cottage. Minimal vegetation will be removed, and it will be maintained within the shoreline areas. Site plan control will be applied to the property in order to protect the existing vegetation and the shoreline. So a site visit has been conducted, and it has determined that this is the most appropriate location for the proposed development, and it will not negatively impact the aesthetic quality of the waterfront community. So the variances individually and collectively are minor, and staff are in support of the application. If you have any questions for myself, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Dana. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence in this application?
No correspondence was received.
Is the applicant present? Would you care to add anything to the planner's comments?
No, I think that was a good comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring the application before the committee. For any comments, Member Cooper.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, technical question. First of all, I'm looking at this proposed site plan, and I note that there's and this isn't really that relevant, but I'm just trying to understand 6 Mile Lake. It's a regulated water body, but I heard high water mark mentioned. So from a technical perspective, it's regulated. There's not really high water on 6 Mile Lake. Is that correct? Other than flooding in the spring?
Do you, Chair Hill, to Member Cooper? Yes, so the way our zoning bylaw calls your front yard setback, it's to the high water mark, but on 6 Mile Lake, it is the regulated water's edge. We just always call it the high water mark. Does that make sense?
I see. So we're using a term that really doesn't apply in this particular case. Is that correct?
So it'd be the regulated water line, but just across the board, we just call it the high water mark.
So just a suggestion, and that would be to refer to an accurate type of designation. The other thing I heard was that I wanted to know where this potential blasting might be.
So it would be, I'll go to this closer one. Back here at the rear, within this. So when
But it's not being blasted, is that
No.
correct?
When they originally circulated the application to go at the last month's meeting, they were set back at 19 meters rather than the 17 meter setback that they have proposed today. And the reason that they changed it was because if they kept it at 19 meters, they were going to need to blast the rock behind it. So to avoid that, they pushed the cottage forward and recirculated their application at a lesser setback.
So I would just like to say that I think this is an exemplary way of dealing with the wonderful rocks that we have in our township. So I would definitely support not blasting and moving a few meters. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cooper. Member Demke.
Thank you. I didn't have a chance to get out there. I can't get to the water properties, but I'll defer any comments to those that have been able to be there. Thanks.
Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be in agreement with Councillor Cooper if we can avoid blasting and move it forward by a meter or two. It seems to make sense. The addition, sorry, I'm not calling it an addition, but the part to the, as you're looking at it to the left where the new cottage sign is going to be relatively hidden by existing mature trees, which I assume will be staying in place. So our old adage of sort of the view from the canoe isn't going to change that dramatically. So I would support this application.
Thank you. Member Caddo.
Yeah, just a question for Dana. Whereabouts is the septic located in relation to the addition or the new cottage? Because it doesn't really show it on there, does it?
Yeah. Through you, Chair Hill, to Member Caddo. I don't believe they've finalized the exact location, but I believe.
No, the existing.
Oh, the
bed.
existing?
Yeah.
Sorry, the existing is under the
so
new
there's not
cottage.
going to be, so it's going to be, there'll be no because there's no trees there at all now because of the bed, so no
Yeah.
vegetation, okay.
Yeah, it's open, so
Sure.
they're gonna decommission that and they're gonna install
Yeah.
a new one, I believe, somewhere back there.
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
Member Bocek.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Cooper that anytime we can save a rock and maybe infringe a tiny bit on a front yard setback in a case like this where we don't have a high water, and I agree it should be called a watermark, not a high water mark. And I do agree with our planning department, and I'd like to congratulate our planning department because it seems to me that there's been a lot of communication and a lot of work between the two of you to come up with this compromise. And I think that's great customer service, and I appreciate the work that the planning department does in cases like this. And I would fully support this, mainly due to the fact that most of the build is either away from the water or sideways and not purposely building towards the water. So I'm satisfied with this application and I will support it.
Thank you, Member Bocek. It seems we have a strong appetite for approval here. Could I have a motion for approval? Motion from Member Cooper, seconded by Member Demke. All those in favor? The application is approved. Our next minor variance application. Colin, would you let Mr. Ferguson know he's welcome to join us? No, keep him out there.
Thanks, Victoria.
All those in favor? Okay.
Don't forget to read the
Oh.
resolution, and it was already moved and seconded, because I've gotten them all moved and seconded already.
Okay.
Okay?
That's why you get paid the big bucks, eh? Keep me on track?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did she straighten
Not so much the big bucks.
Very well. If we could move forward then with the next application, is a minor variance application. Excuse me, gentlemen?
Can you sign that too?
No, it's just, Member Cooper and Mr. Robinson. Excuse me, gentlemen, we're in the middle of a meeting. Thank you. Our next application is a minor variance where is that? Is minor variance number A19-32 for 88-38 Go Home Lakeshore. To the planner, please.
Our next application was submitted by Flow Drawings and Design, Inc. on behalf of Neil Bourne, the homeowner, for lands located at 8838 Go Home Lakeshore, which is located within Go Home Lake. So the request of the application is to permit the redevelopment of a dwelling pursuant to the Shoreline Residential Type 1 SR1 zone with a minimum setback for an accessory structure to a dwelling of 2.7 meters where 5 meters is required, a front yard setback to a dwelling of 9.4 meters where 20 meters is required, and a front yard setback to a deck of 5.6 meters where 16 meters is required. So here we have a location map of the subject lands, which is located along the west shoreline of Go Home Lake, specifically located within Four Seasons Bay. So within the official plan, the subject lands are currently designated waterfront, and within the zoning bylaw, they are zoned shoreline residential type 1. So here we have some aerial footage of the property. Again, as per usual, the CGIS property lines are a little bit off, so it is not specific to scale. Existing structures on the property include a dwelling, shed, cabin, and dock system. So here we have a zoomed in version of the proposed site plan. So the application requests a proposed addition, as you can see here outlined in bold black, of 30 square meters, which is approximately 320 square feet in area, with 10.2 square meters of that area taking advantage of existing footprint. So there is a bit of overlap to new and existing. And of course, as you can see, the proposed addition is to maintain the existing main front wall of the dwelling, as well as build an extension to the existing deck. So again, just to reiterate, the proportions of the application include to recognize the existing setback of this rear shed to the existing dwelling, permit the expansion into the front yard. As you can see here, the way that the shoreline is located, even though it is the same front wall of the dwelling, again, it just creates that it is going technically into the front yard, and as well as that front yard setback to the proposed deck expansion. And it is important to note that the proposed footprint is within the remaining provisions of legally existing non-compliant structures in regards to gross floor area, dwelling width and height. So the total gross floor area that's being proposed for the dwelling is approximately 895 square feet. So here we have the full extent of the survey and site plan that was submitted. So the subject lands are about 1.5 acres in area, so it is quite a large lot. And as you can see here, the proposed development is located in this area. So here we have the existing front elevation versus the proposed. So as you can see, essentially this portion here is what would be added to the existing structure. And again, the proposed floor plan, this is the existing area, and this is what is being proposed, and the expansion to the deck. So here we have some photos of the subject land. So this is the existing dwelling from the dock. And again, the existing dwelling. And here we have a side profile, and this stake here essentially notates where the expansion of that proposed deck would protrude out to. And here's that existing shed to the rear. So again, a portion of this application is to recognize the existing setback between that shed and the dwelling. So I did include this photograph if some of you had gone to site. There are a couple of trees that have been taken down, and I just wanted to address that. It is staff's understanding that these trees, I believe there was 2 in total, they were damaged from a bad storm that did happen a few years ago on the lake, and they are remaining on the site from the previous owner. The existing owner did not cut those down, to my understanding, and they were taken down because they were damaged from lightning. So here is a view from the proposed front wall of the deck, looking towards the water. And here's a picture, I apologize I didn't rotate it, of one tree that would be proposed to be removed within the front yard area. As you can see, it is quite damaged and is not surviving. So the overall proposed built form is well within the maximum lot coverage for the subject lands. It is of modest total area of 895 square feet. And through site plan control, the township would have the opportunity to protect the vegetation that does exist along the shoreline. Staff are of the opinion that the application meets the 4 tests and does recommend approval. The applicant's agent is here if you have any questions for them or myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence on this application?
One letter of support was received.
Okay. Is the applicant present? And would you care to make comment on the in addition to what the planners have made? Could you identify yourself, please?
Good morning. My name is Victoria Hoffman. I'm here on behalf of Flow Drawings and Design Inc. at 3 Violet Drive, Port Severn. Victoria has done a good job addressing this minor variance. Like many properties on Go Home Lake, it kind of just came down to the topography again. I did want to address that the trees that were cut down weren't lightning. It was actually a couple summers ago, not 100% sure, but a bad storm took down several, and the tops of a lot of the trees snapped, but a lot of that shoreline was actually pretty badly affected. But other than that, Victoria's done a good job explaining our...
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public that wish to add comment to this application? Okay, seeing none, I will bring this application before the committee for comment, beginning with Member Ferguson.
It's quite normal, given the topography of Go Home Lake, that cottages are, most of them are built very close to the shore because there's a large incline directly behind the area. So this isn't abnormal. The cottage they're proposing is under 1,000 square feet, so it's, it really is a very, very reasonable size by what we're seeing going on in the township today. So I don't have any problems with this application.
Thank you. Member Bochek.
Yeah, I agree. If anybody's ever traversed the property up on Go Home Lake, it's almost like no other part of the township. And certainly this is a design and build that suits the area, and I support the application.
Thank you. Member Caddo?
I support this because the existing cottage looks like she's a little worn and due for a little bit of a fix-up, so I definitely support this.
Thank you. Member Cooper?
Could I just have you go back to the picture of the actual structure that shows the footings and so on, not the drawings, but I think it was that one. So that's existing, is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay, so just wanted to clarify that. And then secondly, the profile of the drawings, I'd like to see those, the before and after. So we're putting a deck up at the upper level, so the building will still have sort of this raised view to it. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. I really don't have a problem. I just wanted to understand if there's any way to, if there'd been any attempt to sort of bring the building down. But thank you.
Thank you. Member Demke.
Thank you. I wasn't at the property, so I can't comment to what actually is there. I just wanted to ask a question of the planning department. In the letter that came in of disapproval, there was a question about the cumulative shoreline structure size. It said it's determined to be 24 meters, but...
Wrong application.
Is it? Yes. Well, I thought that was 45. Sorry. Wrong one. No more comments, sorry.
Thank you. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, Victoria, just a point of clarity, here you've got the existing with us showing a small deck, and then the application is for a much bigger deck. But the pictures you showed didn't show any deck.
Right.
It was...
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that it was taken down because it was not doing well. To say it lightly.
I'm actually pretty sure it's still on the ground in front of us.
Yeah, I think remnants are still...
The surveyor did get out before they took the deck down though.
Okay, thank you for that point of clarity and the amputation of the deck. So, yeah, again, it seems very modest, particularly for an 1.5 acre piece of property. It's a very minor. I have no problem with that.
Thank you very much. It appears that we are in agreement here. And prior to asking for the vote, I think I'll read the motion. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A19-32 for 8838 Go Home Lakeshore to permit the development of an addition to an existing dwelling with a minimum setback of an accessory structure to a dwelling of 2.7 meters, a front yard setback to a dwelling of 9.4 meters, and a front yard setback to a deck of 5.6 meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that photographs of the existing shoreline area and vegetation be submitted to the township. C, that a site plan approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation protection areas, and the additional plantings of the front yard in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And D, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Our next minor variance application is A19-33 for 2 Islands 1660 Georgian Bay Shore. To the planner, please.
So our next application was submitted by Ben Withers on behalf of Kenneth Withers for lands located at 2 Island 1660 Georgian Bay, which is located within Cognachine. So the application requests to permit the development of a dock pursuant to the Cognachine Shoreline Residential Island Zone with a maximum length of a finger from a main dock of 14 meters, where 10 meters is permitted, and a maximum cumulative width of shoreline structures of 24 meters, whereas 20 meters is permitted. So here is a location map of the subject lands. In the center here, it is located just north of Bosley Island. So within our official plan, it is currently designated Cognachine Coastal Waterfront Community, and within the zoning bylaw, it is zoned Cognachine Shoreline Residential Island. So here we have an aerial image of the subject lands. So current structures on the property include a dwelling, a cabin, an accessory sheds, a boathouse, a dock system, and 2 marine railways. And just of note, the area of the island is approximately 8.5 acres, so it is quite a large island in this area. So here we have the proposed plan superimposed onto an aerial image of the subject lands. So to reiterate what this application is asking for, so an increase in the total length of a finger coming out from the main dock. So in this instance, we would include both sides coming off of this main central portion, which does equate to that 14 meters that's being requested, as well as a maximum cumulative width of all shoreline structures. So that would include the existing boathouse and the existing marine railways, as well as the proposed dock, which does increase that to 24 meters, whereas 20 meters is currently permitted. So it is also important to note that through this application, no additional docks or any other structures would be permitted on the subject lands without having to obtain further planning approval in the future, because again, that maximum cumulative width, what they're proposing to ask for today is what would allow the development of this specific dock. So anything additional to that would require further planning approval. So here we have a drone image of the existing island, and an image from the existing dock looking towards the shore. And again, looking towards that existing boathouse. And as you can see, the existing dock there, again, is not doing very well. looking out towards the adjacent shoreline, quite a ways away from the proposed portion of the dock. And again, just looking towards the north of the existing shoreline. And again, towards adjacent lands to the, I guess it would be to the subject lands. And then another image, again, just illustrating how far away this island really is from any adjacent property. So the proposed dock does not go beyond the maximum projection permitted within the Cognizine area and is not anticipated to create a navigational hazard nor impact the overall character of the area. Staff are in the opinion that the application meets the 4 tests and does recommend approval. The applicant's agent is here if you have any questions, or for myself.
Thank you, Victoria. Has there been any correspondence on this application?
One letter of opposition was received, and it was circulated this morning to committee members.
When was that letter circulated?
Just this morning, it came in last night.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, too, there was also a letter of support submitted by the Cognizine Association as well.
Thank you. Is the applicant present? Yes. Would you care to add anything to what Victoria had to tell us this morning? If so, please come forward and identify yourself and your accomplice.
Ben Withers, 2 Island 1660 Georgian Bay, Honey Harbor, P0E180. I've lived up here full-time since 2009, and my grandparents bought the island in 1949. We've had a couple of boats get swamped just because of wave action from wind as well as man-made waves passing the front of our property. So we feel that this dock is a requirement to live there year-round.
And is there any other comment?
I'm White. I represent White Contracting and the Withers family as well. Part of the cumulative width of 24 meters, I believe a couple of inclusions have been temporary structures in the form of marine railways to accomplish the 24 meters. So it's, I mean, it's obviously real, but they are temporary structures, which in all likelihood would be removed with the benefit of the bigger dock, I suspect.
That's correct, yes.
The finger length, Mr. Withers actually came to us with his own dock design, and it was designed purposely to suit the boats that the family currently owns. It wasn't built with the thought that he was going to go out and buy a bigger boat next year and then build another bigger dock and that sort of thing. The other thing that this structure would accomplish for him is I highly doubt that they would have the need for docks or additional docks beyond this, although they would, I believe, have the right to have multiple docks on this property due to the frontage and so on. The single nearest island is Sunset Island to the west, which is approximately 0.4 kilometers away from there. Anybody that knows Sunset Island knows what the lot coverage and that sort of thing and the character of that particular island is. This island is very underutilized, I would suggest. The next neighbor to that, I believe, is 0.8 kilometers away, so I do...
Right, which is the one in the view just behind the boats there, Stars Island.
So, quite a ways away. We were unaware of the letter against Mr. Withers' proposal until this hearing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this application? Very well. Seeing none, I will bring the application before the committee for comments. And I would ask that we begin with Member Cattle.
I'm by this site several times a week. The existing dock that's there now, you don't even realize it's there. It's a big island, and you're not going much beyond what's there now. So, and it's definitely needs repair. It needs something done. That's for sure. So, anyways, I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Member Bocek?
Yeah, well, I can understand the need and the want for this. Unfortunately, we received correspondence from a neighbor or somebody in the Cognition area who I have a lot of respect for, and I really haven't had enough time to digest and to really study what has come in this letter. So I'd like to hear what other members have to say first and give me a chance to dive into this a little deeper. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't even realize we had received that letter until it came up at this point. So I find it difficult to consider a letter that is submitted like a minute before the meeting starts. I would suggest that we read that after the meeting and not spend time during the meeting by reading that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's some very valuable points in this letter, and when we're given something like this at the last minute, there's no ability to go out or to research and find out exactly what these accusations are. So,
well, that's my point, Member Bocek. You know, you can't slip in a minute before the meeting starts and present something that would take you know, a committee member some time to consider and research and understand. You know, I just find that that's not appropriate. So I would suggest that we set that letter aside for now and not consider it. So there is a certain limit, I think, that we need to adhere to. Thank you. Member Ferguson.
Is the planning department aware of this correspondence that came in?
I'll just speak to it briefly. It came in at, I think it was like 8:37 or something like that this morning. So we haven't had a chance to look at it in detail, but it looks like Ms. Halpenny's identified what she thinks are other variances that might be required for this application. And we don't know, like, I would have to have a look at in detail, and we haven't had a chance to do that yet. Nonetheless, this application that's been made are for specific variances. If committee agrees with the variance that have been applied for, they could grant those variances today. If Ms. Halpenny's right and other variances are required, then they'd have to come back and apply for those other variances at that time. But we haven't had an opportunity to have a look at what she's said, but maybe Victoria has had a chance, I'm not sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I can do my best to consolidate in general what she had brought up to attention in my points on that.
If I might, I think we'll just set that aside for now. As I mentioned, if there is something in that requires future consideration, then let's deal with it outside. We have in front of us now an application here that's been properly processed and duly notified, and I think we should move forward and discuss the content of what's in front of us and leave that to the planning department for the future. So with that in mind, any comments from Member Matthews?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess on the rough drawing that was up of the dock itself, which supposedly Mr. Withers drew, it shows 55 feet on each side, which is closing in on 17 meters. The application says it's 14 meters, whereas 10 meters is permitted. I need a little clarity on that. And also, in all due respect to Chair Hill, I have a great deal of respect for this letter, and I haven't had a chance to digest it either. I think we may be rushing this application, but to that, my first point, I would like clarity on that, please, Victoria.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Matthews. So essentially, this specific provision in the zoning bylaw is it relates to fingers coming off of the main portion of the dock. So the area that equates to that 14 meters is this area to this side plus this area to this side. The overall width of the dock is within that additional provision that's being asked for that cumulative width. And when it comes to the way that the bylaw looks at fingers coming off of the main dock, it is kind of equating from what comes off this main section. So it does not, It's kind of weird how it is written, but that is just how it is done. So you are correct that it is 16.7 meters in total width, which is taken into consideration in that cumulative width provision that's being asked for.
So further to that, Victoria, if I may, the center section that shows, I think, as 10 feet, if my
Yes.
eyes are working today,
Yeah.
that's what is considered as the main dock?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair,
So-
yes, it is.
So we don't take into account that 10 feet, we just do the 10 feet to the left and the 30 feet to the right, or whatever it happens to be.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. And
But
I-
again,
I
it is,
guess-
it is taken into consideration, this 55 feet in that overall shoreline width provision.
And the dock itself, the width of it, is that the 24 meters of cumulative shoreline structure?
So
Because
that-
like a 24 feet of a U-shaped dock there seems generous, shall we say?
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair, that 24 meter width number that comes into play takes into consideration the proposed, again, that full 55 feet of the dock, as well as the width of the existing boathouse and the 2 existing marine railways. And as the applicants did point out, those potentially may be temporary or not, though obviously through the review of the application, we need to consider that they may be there permanently. That's why we included them in that 24 meters. So the boathouse width is 4.3 meters, and the marine railways are 1.5 meters each, so that is where that 24 meters equates from. So it's not just the dock, it's all shoreline structure.
It's all shoreline structure, and
That is
20
correct.
meters is permitted.
20 meters is permitted, and they're asking for 24.
Okay, I'm having great difficulty with this one, as you can tell. It seems, in my opinion, excessive. I know exactly where it is. I go by that island every single day. Stop to make sure that your huskies didn't get run over as they swam to the next island. So we're very, very familiar with it, and I understand the wind direction and the boat traffic that you get there. I just find that this application to be in excess of the Cognizine plan. And my other question, I guess, to Mr. Withers is he calls his address as Honey Harbor, except we're saying that this is Cognizine, and I didn't have time to pull up the map and see exactly where the dividing line is, but perhaps you could clarify that for me, Victoria.
Sure, so through you, Mr. Chair, again, I don't know the exact location of that line either, but when it comes to ward versus the way that the zoning lines are aligned, in the zoning bylaw, they are considered within the Cognizine location, whereas I believe in their general political ward, they are considered Honey Harbor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Demke.
I apologize for bringing this up at the last one, but I still had that question, and in hearing everything, there seems to be a lot up in the air. I'm not sure what's included in shoreline structure or not. It sounds like the boathouse and such, they may or may not stay. Is that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it has been noted by the applicants that the 2 marine railways that are within that 24 meters, it sounds like they may be temporary. If that is maybe something that the committee would have appetite for, that the applicants would be willing to allow to be a condition that those be removed in order to allow the dock, that may be something that could be of discussion here today, or with the applicants afterwards, again, depending on what the direction that committee likes to go. But so yes, the boathouse is proposed to stay. It would be potentially the marine railways that would be temporary.
Okay. Yeah, and but that all takes in the 24.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And the intent, what I read out of the letter was that there's more that should be included, and I'm not sure what that would be.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any other shoreline structures that would be included in that calculation. Within Cognizine, it is different in the way that they include shoreline structures, everything within 10 meters of the shoreline, I believe it is. And that is something that we included in our evaluation, and that's why the marine railways are part of that as well.
Okay, and just a question for Mr. Robinson, is it that if there are other variances, they would have to apply at a separate time?
Yes, if that's the case, we don't. But
Okay.
there's been an application made for specific variances. That's what committee's dealing with today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Cooper.
Thank you. I studied this application, and the more I looked at it, the more I had a challenge with it. I start with the official plan for Cognizine, which, you know, in the wordings and so forth, there's a clear intent of the official plan to minimize visual impact on the shoreline. It's in the official plan, and I think when you start looking at the sort of overall the desires of the community to minimize visual impact, including shoreline structures, we need to think about that. There are a number of questions that have obviously been raised in this letter that has come in this morning. It is still a letter of objection, and it is in advance of the application, last minute or not. There's some very, very interesting points that have been raised, and I think they're deserving of examination. I guess I have to say also, while this is quite a large island, the effective frontage, in a sense, could be considered in two directions. One is from the side as you drive by this place on either side, but if really the reality is if you're coming up the shore and you come upon this island, your visual impact is the southeast end of the island. So that would be my frontage, is where these docks are going, and what people will see, at least heading north as opposed to south. So it is visual impact. I also, just looking at the drawings myself, I had some real challenges. Now, I have to say that the application, there's a lot more information being presented today, but it was pretty, sorry, but fairly sketchy initially. And so when I was looking at some of the drawings, and I subsequently got some more information sent to me, I was having difficulty finding 24 meters. I'm seeing in a way, if you go to the extreme west side of this boathouse and you go 10 meters in and you measure straight across, I'm finding it more like 30 meters. So there's some serious questions being raised here, and I would recommend that we consider a deferral until we've given these matters, and the planning department has also had a chance to examine these particular matters. So I would be recommending a deferral due to what has been raised here. This person that's written in, by the way, is a representative of the Cognizine community and also sits on the planning committee, and I'm not sure that these considerations were given at the time that the letter was written from the Cognizine community. So I think there was perhaps some on their part, maybe some oversight issues, but I can't support it, I'm sorry. And I'd prefer not to deny it, but I prefer to have a deferral so we can consider these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cooper. I see a finger up over there near Victoria. You had something you wanted.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I thank you for all your comments, and obviously we take that into consideration. I did just want to reiterate that from my interpretation of the letter that was received this morning, it was not necessarily a letter of opposition to the application in front of us today and in front of you today for approval. It was a matter of this member of the public that was, as Mr. Cooper has pointed out, bringing up things that she may disagree with planning's review of, in the sense of what she would consider to be parts of this application or not. My initial review of what was sent this morning, I still stand behind the application that is in front of you today. However, of course, if committee wishes to have some additional, more a visual interpretation of what's being asked for, that's obviously in committee's hands. I just wanted to reiterate that I don't feel that this is necessarily a letter of opposition. However, just a letter of difference of opinion of how the application was presented. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And although I haven't had any time at all to read this, if you look at the beginning of this, it appears that this letter was sent earlier, and perhaps there was a problem with the email address. One of the members changed their name, and I guess that it still goes through. Yeah, so that's not valid then. Okay, forget that argument. Okay, the question here, and I think we're somewhat of a similar mind, is that we've been charged with the responsibility of reviewing the application as it's presented. And I agree, Victoria, if the comments that you've got are really not reflective of an objection, you know, but maybe just an observation of things that may have been taken more seriously. Sorry, John. Then you know, it's unfortunate we didn't have a chance to look at this earlier and have it as part of our deliberation. The decision whether to move forward with approval or defeat or deferral lies with the committee. And it is based on a vote, and of course the majority wins. And I think you've heard as we went through the members of the committee today that there is a difference of opinion. And all we can do is determine which of those positions has the majority. I tend to agree with planning and with Mr. Robinson that we should look at the facts as presented in front of us. Notwithstanding the fact that you know, we did have an application whose points of view should be taken into consideration. Unfortunately, we got that 15 minutes before the meeting, and we haven't had the time that we would normally do to do that. So I think, you know, I don't know what the reason was for that, but it makes it very difficult for members of the committee to consider whatever the content of that letter was. So before I read the okay, I'm getting to that. Before we actually read the motion, I would like to find out if there is an appetite for deferral on this application, or should we just go directly into the motion?
Just on that point, if I may.
Certainly.
I think you articulated, Chair, a very clear reason why we should have a deferral. We need to consider these matters. So I am definitely in favor of a deferral. I'm not of the view that this needs to necessarily be denied, but I think would be very helpful for the planning department and this individual to review this, and I think we'd be in a much better spot having considered all these things as opposed to saying we're not going to pay attention to this. So I strongly suggest we have a deferral. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other comment? How do you feel, Bill?
I would probably look at deferral myself.
Okay. Variances?
Deferral.
And member Brady?
Deferral? Yeah, unfortunately, there's some matters within the application that is in front of us that would lead me to not let this go through. So I think if a few of these minor things are addressed and we defer, that perhaps the next time we revisit this application, things will go a lot smoother and we'll have a better understanding. So I would vote for a deferral.
Thank you, Member Cato.
I just find this letter come up way too late. Everyone had their mind set yesterday, let's say, and all of a sudden at 8:37 we get a letter. To me, there should be a time, a date and time. You get your letters in before, say, noon yesterday. Other than that, sorry, you're too late. And I still approve this.
Okay, thank you. Now, just so we have everybody's input here, John, you had a question that you'd like to throw out or comment?
A couple of comments with regards to some of the committee's questions and so forth. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Dock measurements are very prescriptive. We're taught in back of our zoning bylaw catalogs how we're supposed to measure docks, so we measure them consistently each time, every time. With regards to the frontage and so on, there's also a very prescriptive method as to how we're to measure frontage, not from this corner to that corner, but of the structures cumulatively. And as far as deferral goes, if we can go back to the dock pictures for a few minutes.
The real-time ones, or this?
Yes, please, the one showing the dock in the water. There we go. That's their home. That's their home. A deferral is 30 days plus the 20 days beyond that. That's where these folks live. 12 months of the year. A deferral would really put them... A deferral would put these folks in quite in peril. But anyway, I respect that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Victoria?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to reiterate, if this is to be the choice of committee to look at a deferral, just to ensure that there is specific direction back to staff as to what exactly committee would be looking for, in the sense of, is it being deferred to look at these specific comments that were brought in, or is it a matter of the application before you today you have no appetite for, and you're looking for potentially some modification to that? If there can be some clarity for us staff to have, in order to make sure that if it is to be deferred today, that we are able to meet what you're looking for when we come back. That's all. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Victoria. That's a very good question. The two requirements here of this application, where is it? Right here. Is to permit the development of a dock with a maximum length of a finger of 14 meters, a maximum cumulative width of shoreline structures of 24 meters, and where 20 is allowed, and I guess to be clear, 3 or more of that, 4 that we're over, is for marine railway, which I'm surprised that that's not considered a temporary. I don't think you can leave marine railways in the water over the winter. Am I correct on that, John? Or?
It's not a typical practice, especially out in that region where there's so much ice shift and so on.
Yeah, so that was sort of a fuzzy one for me. Anywhere around where I am on Georgian Bay, the marine railway is temporary, and then it comes out in the fall. But anyway, it seems minor. None of us have read, that I can understand, none of us have read this letter, so I'm not sure what I think what we're doing here is deferring this application so we can read the letter, which was presented 15 minutes before the meeting started. And you have a comment, Mr. Cooper?
Just this, and that is that we were asked a question by the planning department as to some sort of direction. I would offer up the following, that I think we should work very diligently to get back to the applicant so that this could come forward to the next Committee of Adjustment meeting. Yeah. Not a deferral for a long period of time, and that we examine some of the things that are in this letter to make sure that there has not been any sort of missed issues or oversights, etc. So that isn't, we're not suggesting a delay for a long period of time, and I personally want these people to have a very strong and suitable moorage system there. So I'm very much interested in making sure that they get that, but I saw myself some issues from the report that I was able to read, some subsequent information that I received yesterday, but still put me in the same position, which was I'm failing to understand why it's being approved or requested or recommended when there may be some questions as to these particular issues. So I'd like to see some discussion between the applicant, the points that have been raised, and the planning department to come back to the next committee of adjustment. And I think that's what you were asking for, as opposed to just denying this. I'm not interested in just denying this at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Just to be clear, the next meeting was 30 days roughly from now, and then there is an appeal period that runs for 20 days after that. So that's a fairly, today's September the 13th, so it's put. Yeah, and I would expect that the contractor would be ill-advised to begin construction on this before getting the approval. So there is a concern here for access to somebody's year-round accommodation based on questions that we don't even know what they are yet, because we haven't read this letter. So I have a concern there. And let's get to comment from Mr. Bocek.
When I reviewed the application, I didn't have a problem with the cumulative width. I didn't have a problem with the length of the fingers. Where I did have a problem, before reading any correspondence, including the one that came in this morning, was what I would call the shore platform. It's very specific. I had to actually reach into the Cognizine plan and into the official plan to know, because it is different there than it is in most of the rest of the township. And having this shore platform where it is, the size it is, and cantilevering over within the high water mark was the reason I would not want to approve this. If there was modification made to that specific part, and you asked the committee what our concerns were, that would be my major concern, would be the shore platform not meeting the required, I think in the Cognizine plan, Peter, you can help me with this, is 5 meters, regardless of elevation, okay? And that doesn't fall into this category, that doesn't meet that. So based on that, I would have a problem. We have to always support the intent of the official plan, which was written by our residents and by the residents of Cognizine. That's really the only thing I had an issue with. I haven't got into this letter. Apparently there's other issues here that I have to substantiate and go back to our official plan and look at to make sure, but I wasn't willing to move ahead with this just simply because of the shore platform, unless there was some sort of modification today that was going to say to me, okay, we see that, we will come back, we'll comply with that, then I was fine with it. But until that point happens, I won't. And I think that's why I'm looking for a deferral, so somebody can come back with me immediately and say, we're going to address this situation and make it right.
Could I have a response on that, Victoria?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just back to Victoria's question about the reasons for the deferral. If I may just ask the committee members to turn to page 89 of the package, which is the table 1, so it's page 2 of 7 of this report, which is 2019-100. I think it'll just provide a bit of clarity for you.
As slow as our internet here is, if you could just give us a second to get to that point. Again, what page is it?
So it's page 89 of 171. Are we there?
Not yet. Are you talking about if we're supposed to be looking in the official plan?
No, I'd like you to the agenda package, page 89 of 171. I think it would just be helpful if you pulled up that page. We could just make sure we're all on the same page here.
I can try.
Is this in the application itself?
It's in the package.
It's in the package.
For this meeting, yes.
There's a table at the top of the page.
The variance detail?
Yes. You're there? Okay. It's just what Victoria's question was specifically is for the, if it's deferred, is the deferral just to simply look at Ms. Halpenny's comments and see if there's other variances that are required? Or is there not an appetite at all for the 2 variances that are being requested here? That's really what we'd like some clarity on. Because if there isn't an appetite for the 2 variances that are being requested in this table, then your message to the proponent, I think, is can you make some modifications to the proposal to lessen the impact, for example? But if that's not your message to them, and the message is simply, let's look at Ms. Halpenny's comments and see if there are any additional variances that are required, that just provides us some direction on where we're going with this deferral, if it is deferred. And I don't, to this point, Mr. Bocek, Councillor, or Member Bocek in this instance, has identified that he has some concerns with potentially there being other considerations, shore platform, etc. But I think he didn't have any concerns with these 2 specific variances to keep it.
Well, to respond to that, being from a contractor background, it's very hard to allow these increases to a structure that is to be built and not attached. And in order to attach these structures, it has to attach to a shore platform, which the shore platform, I don't believe, meets the intent of the official plan. So unless you're going to build these structures and just have them floating offshore, which isn't any use to anyone, I think the shore platform needs to be addressed. And as far as I can see, it doesn't meet the intent of the bylaw. And I'd be willing to, if it's through the chair, if you allow the applicant to speak, I'd be willing to him respond as well too.
Thank you for that. I just, we're venturing away from what the content of the application is. In my, we're talking about the size and extent of the dock, and the shore platform wasn't raised by the issue of a shore plant wasn't raised by the planning department or the building department as this application moved forward. I just, why is a question related to something that's not included in the application being brought forward?
Well, if you're looking for an answer for that, that happens quite often, and we're here to make sure that there's no oversight of our planning department. And in this case, where I think there was an oversight of the planning department and should have been included in this report and it wasn't. Hence, I would like to see it in the report.
And again, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I appreciate your comment. Where did you get the information about the shore platform? Like, why wouldn't the rest of the committee have seen that?
It was in the picture. If you'd like to go back to the overlay, yeah, go back there. If you look right on the shore, that square on the shore, which is in this application, is actually the shore platform. And this is to be an addition to existing. Replace what's there with what's in the red, and that red includes that shore platform, which wasn't in the application. That's what drew my attention long before we received this morning.
Okay, I didn't see that. And
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to make some comments on Mr. Bocek's questions.
Sure.
Or sorry, Member Bocek.
Sure.
I would like to reiterate that this idea of a shore platform, and I can understand from this image why that may have been raised by yourself or members of the public. In my opinion, as the author of the report, I do not believe that this is considered a shore platform, and I will provide to you why. As you can see here, yes, on this image, which is just a superimposed of an aerial, I don't know exactly when this was taken, taking that away from the conversation. As you can see here, all dock structures on all water bodies in the municipality are measured from the current watermark. As you can see here, the current watermark is right there. Looking at this dock structure as a whole and the intent of how it's supposed to operate, as you can see, even here, that existing ramp, because it is currently a ramp, is now at that current water line. The way that this is to function is the current, it's supposed to be measured from that current water level, and that is how it was interpreted from the planning department. the concept of a freestanding deck, as Cognizine has made it clear in their official plan, is to be located 5 meters back from the high water mark. It is in my opinion that this is not considered a freestanding deck, and when it comes to taking into consideration comments that were received, I do not anticipate my opinion of that changing. So the overall projection of the structure as a whole meets the 20 meters and would have to meet the 20 meters as part of their building permit application to be signed off. And when it comes to the width conversation that has been provided, I think that if it were to be deferred, maybe something that would come about of that is ensuring that those marine railways are taken away. Is that something that we can deal with today? Potentially, if it were to be of committee's choice to require those to be removed. And in that case, the cumulative width would only be 21 meters and not 24. So I would just like to provide that as some additional
Thank you,
comments.
Victoria, for that clarification. And just so that I'm clear on it, in that picture you just had there, which disappeared,
Sorry, this one?
is the overall length of that dock, does it include that box that's closest to shore, the one that Councillor Bocek is referring to?
So, sorry, I just have dimensions here. So, as you can see here, so this portion from here to here is a total length of 44 feet. So when we're taking into consideration this additional ramp, the ability to get them to the main dock, to their land, this entire projection of the structure would have to be 20 meters. So that allows 6.6 meters from this structure to still be within that projection, which I feel that the applicants can absolutely meet in the sense of the ramp.
So that means that we are not exceeding the overall length?
In my opinion, no, the application is not. And if the applicants want to make comments on that, they can meet that.
A maximum length of a finger of a main dock of 14 meters.
And that is this scenario that we were talking about.
Oh, okay.
I apologize, I was talking about the overall projection
Yeah.
of the dock because, again, the comments of shore platform versus ramp was coming into play. And I have evaluated this application based on the system as a whole and do not consider that to be a shore platform.
Does that satisfy your Councillor Bocek or Member Bocek?
Yeah, go back to the hand drawing.
Hand drawing, sure.
This is not what we're going to see when it's finished. The ramp that comes down to this structure where it meets the land, is there not going to be a shore structure there? And if so, which it shows in this application, it is cantilevered out over the water instead of meeting the 5 meter setback. So I'm either confused by your drawing or I'm confused at how this dock network is going to end up marrying into the rock outcropping there.
So through Mr. Chair, and again, I hope that you will allow the applicants to ensure that I'm reiterating this correctly. As you can see where the current water is, where this portion that some may be considering a shore platform is located, if that entire thing is over the water, I consider that part of the deck. That's not considered a shore platform, given its definition in the bylaw. In the sense of it being where it's pinned over the current watermark of that day, I can't speak to that. That's where the contractors come into play. But in my evaluation of the application, it's from that current watermark. They're just trying to get onto the rock from what's there.
So there's no planned structure to be pinned to the island in the way of a 140 square deck or so you're talking about a ramp just going up onto that rock? No. Which is,
Okay.
I'm confused.
If I might ask the applicant to respond to that question, this seems to be a key element here. Could you provide information as to how this floating structure will be attached to the shore?
Councillors, sorry, Mr. Bocek's point, and I perceive probably to Mr. Cooper's point, there is in fact essentially three components to this system. It's all one dock essentially. It has a shore platform, which is a dock or a component of the dock. It would pin to the rock. It would not cantilever over. There is a diagram within the application which shows the typical construction methodology. Back to, I think where planning has taken us with regards to prescriptiveness of our zoning bylaws. Absolutely, Cognition, it is a requirement that shore decks be 5 meters back from the high water. High water. Docks need to be in the water. As soon as the legs of a dock become dry, it becomes a deck and then becomes non-compliant. And we are allowed up to, I believe, 20 meters of projection. The intent is to ensure that this dock system would project no more than 20 meters because we know that that is not permissible through our bylaws. And absolutely, that dock cannot come up onto the dry land because that turns it into a deck and makes it non-compliant, and we're very, very aware of that. In fact, we went through that with Mr. Withers because so many of our decks, our docks in our township in different regions, they are permissible. It's very, very difficult to appropriately make a dock work right now in Cognition because you can't have any portion of a dock on dry land because it becomes a deck, and then all of a sudden you need to generate access. Typically it's by means of a boardwalk or something of that description, which reduces you down in width, and they function. They look a little bit bizarre, but they function. So very much so, we were aware that that portion or component of the system cannot be up on dry ground. It cannot be because then planning is obligated to tell us that we built a deck in a non-compliant fashion where it is not permissible. It would not be cantilevered to Mr. Bocek's point. In all likelihood, it would self-destruct if we tried to cantilever something, especially out in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Is there a comment from Mr. Cooper?
Yeah, look, one thing I'm finding difficult is what we're looking at here with the red lines, because it's not rather terribly clear. I am, however, looking at the actual application that I received, which shows some white lines and so forth. Have you got that? Can you bring up what I'm looking at?
The photo that was on the notice?
The photo that was on the notice. Yes.
So that is this photo. It just, the lines were made white in order to be able to see it being
so
black and white.
It's very hard to see this particular, but so you can't show what I'm looking at here.
On this computer, I can't bring that up, but it is the same image. It's just instead of red, it was made white.
So what I'm looking at here is this, that, and when I started doing some just sort of nominal measurements, I did a couple of things. I took the 19-meter measurement that you show on the west side. Was there something, Mr. Robinson? No. Thank you. I was looking at the west side of this where it showed 19 meters, and so I used that as sort of a tool to measure everything else, and I went to the extreme west end of the boathouse and went across to where what you're using as a measurement, and I'm coming up with 30, 35 meters, not 24. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I don't know how you can, A, not consider this a shore structure, shore deck, when it is. And you know, we can argue about high water mark and so forth, but the intent of the plan was not to allow something like this. It was to allow a ramp from the shoreline to a floating dock system. And this is the shore deck. And it's within the first 5 meters. So I think we've got some serious questions here about the actual width and also this deck. So there's two main points that I see here. And I do not support passing something piecemeal. I know that's being suggested here, but I think we need to defer this, get to the bottom of the questions that have been asked by others and the two questions that I'm saying are an issue. So that's my final.
Thank you, Member Cooper. I would just ask the planning department, are you confident with the dimensions and the calculations that you've put forward in this application? Or do you agree with Mr. Cooper that there could be some confusion the width of the structure is?
Mr. Chair, my understanding of the application that was brought forward by the applicants and the intent of the structure is what I have put in front of committee today. Obviously, the discussion has gotten quite beyond that, and I don't feel that me providing any further information today seems to be able to make a change, and I would prefer this to be deferred rather than voted on, because clearly there is quite some discrepancies.
Okay, just prior, thank you very much for that, Victoria. Just prior to taking the vote, I'm just going to ask one question of the members. You know, based on the application that is in front of us that has to do with the two exceptions here, both finger length and the cumulative width of the shoreline structure, is there anything specific to those two? And you've made your point, Mr. Cooper, I know where you're coming from. I'd ask Mr. Demke, do you have any concerns or questions about those two items that are on there?
Not the two items themselves.
Okay. And Member Matthews, are you okay with those, or any questions regarding those two issues?
I have a challenge with the overall length being 40% larger than what's permitted, and that does not strike me as being minor. So
okay, thank you.
Have a problem with it.
Member Ferguson, any question about the two items on this?
No, I agree.
Okay. Member Bocek?
I'll answer your question with a no. I don't have anything, with the two that are in front of us, no. But as Councillor Cooper said, or Member Cooper said, it's the accumulation and it's the other factors that come into play that I'm concerned with. So if we're voting strictly on the two amendments that are in front of us today, I'm going to say I don't have an issue, but I do have an issue with this.
Okay, and Member Cadu, thank you for that clarity.
I think everyone knows that.
Yeah, okay. Just for this, we're closing this application right now. Just for a little history here, we need to be a little prudent in how we structure our vote. We had the occasion in the past where everybody thought they were voting for a deferral, and that wasn't the case. If you do not agree with a deferral, just to make sure that that comes out, then the opposite, if the deferral doesn't pass, then the application is refused. So let's just be very careful on that when we go ahead and ask for the vote. So I am going to
Can I ask for one point of clarity?
certainly.
Thank you. Very kind. If I go back to the mailing that went out, Victoria, and it perhaps for me anyways, it's a little easier to see the dock and I'll call it the ramp and the flat area by the shore. Because it's black and white and the red is, I find a little challenging to see there. And no, it's not your fault. But the width of the dock, the width of the fingers is 10 feet. So if I sort of extrapolate that 10 feet and put it between where the main horseshoe dock is to the shore, I'm seeing about 25 feet or so away from the shore. And I'm wondering why it needs to be out that far. Clearly they have docks that are in a lot closer to shore at the current time. You can see it on the right and a couple of sea-doos or something tied to the side of that. I'm confused as to why the projection is as large as it appears on this black and white.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take that note in when it comes to providing maybe additional drawings when it comes back to committee, if it is to be deferred to be more clear. I think at this point in this conversation, I think that would be the best route to take, in my opinion.
Thank you. Just you had other concerns, so the answer to that one wouldn't change
No, it's a point of clarity, because
Yeah.
I'm just, I
Okay.
don't know why it needs to be that
All right.
long, and it concerns me about a platform versus a ramp, and I know it's a challenge that we all face. I mean, right now, if you're out there today, with the water down another 1.5 feet, it's gonna be very different than it will be next Tuesday.
Yep.
Right, so.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move forward. I'm gonna read the motion. And before I do that, again, I'll just caution you, if you are not in favor of a deferral, it is a defeat of the application. So keep that in mind when the vote is called. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A19-33 for 2 Islands 1660 Georgian Bay to permit the development of a dock with a maximum length of a finger from a main dock of 14 meters and a maximum cumulative width of shoreline structures of 24 meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And B, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. And I will just ask, before I ask for the vote, if there are if the application is to be deferred, as I've heard from a number of people on the committee, I would like to know the reason for deferral so that we can pass that on to the planning department. And we'll start with you, Member Cooper.
There's quite a number that have been raised
Well,
today.
give me two.
I'll talk with the shore platform is number one.
All right, shore, and your reason, the shore platform you feel is too big?
I'm not convinced that this shore platform is actually allowed within the Cognition Community Plan. That's number one. Number two is width. So the width of the whole structure, shoreline width that's being designated here, I'm not convinced that we've captured that.
Okay.
Number three.
No, you don't need to. Thank you.
Well, the third would be, our planner has said maybe a deferral makes some sense. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Do you have anything, Mr. Demke?
Not really. I think that's still the shoreline structure size is a question for me. And I don't know enough about the Cognition plan, so I'll say that's mine.
Okay. Mr. Matthews?
I would support Mr. Cooper's concerns.
Okay. And do you have any concerns, Member Ferguson?
I would support Mr. Cooper's concerns and just make a general comment that, there seems to be some discourse here. And so let's get it all done so that it comes back and we can approve it and everyone can go home happy.
Member Bocek?
I concur. I would like to see this come back immediately, and I would hope that our building department would expedite any permits needed once it has passed the Committee of Adjustment. So
Okay.
that this can start before.
I think we know your position, Member Caddo, so I won't, all right.
Just a quick question. So I'm gonna, if everyone votes in deferral, but I'm still voting support. So basically, what happens there?
No, what happens is it's, if the motion is, if somebody puts forward a motion, which somebody will, for deferral, then either you agree or disagree with that. And if you agree, then it's a deferral. If you disagree, it means it's defeated. Okay?
If the majority.
No, that's right. I mean, it's a vote to defeat. It's a vote to defeat. So we need a majority to
I don't want to
defer.
see it defeated, so.
Okay,
I
all
guess
right.
I'll-
And that's why I made that.
Yeah.
We had an instance before where that wasn't clear, so it's clear now. So I've read the motion. Do I have a motion for deferral?
You do.
Member Cooper, is there a seconder? Member Matthews? All those in favor of deferral? The motion is carried. Thank you, gentlemen, for your patience and all the information today. And thank you, Victoria.
Mr. Chair, could I just request a 5-10 minute break? Is that possible until we continue?
Let's take a 10-minute
We're not going to have
recess.
them together, Mike. Yes, the meeting is adjourned for 10 minutes, we're back at 11:20. Thank you. The next application is a minor application, number A19-34 for 139 Big Rock Road, 6 Mile Lake. To the planner, please.
Our next application was submitted by Rob and Sue Kerr for the lands located, or Kerr, sorry, apologize, for the lands located at 139 Big Rock Road, and it's located in 6 Mile Lake. So the request for the application is to permit the development of a screened porch and to also permit additional gross floor area within the existing basement through increasing the height of a portion of the existing basement pursuant to the 6 Mile Lake residential zone, with a maximum gross floor area for a dwelling to 260 square meters, where 216.4 square meters is permitted. So here is a map of the subject land's location. They are located within the west portion of 6 Mile Lake, and they are accessed by Big Rock Road. Within the official plan, they're designated 6 Mile Lake waterfront and zoned 6 Mile Lake residential. So here we have an aerial photograph of the subject lands and surrounding properties. The existing structures include a dwelling, a detached garage, 2 sheds, and a cabin. So here's an overall of the site plan of the subject lands that was submitted. And here we have just zoomed in a little bit towards the actual developed portion. So the portion here outlined in red is where the proposed screened porch is being located to the side of the existing cottage. And the proposed porch is 24.2 square meters, so 260 square feet in area. And when it comes to the portion of the application that is requesting additional area in the basement, this is the existing basement floor plan. And as you can see here, this storage room to the bottom left corner of your screen is being proposed to essentially increase the floor height of that room to allow it to be considered gross floor area. So there is no external changes to the dwelling in this aspect. It is just a matter of them leveling the floor down. And this area is 15.6 square meters, or 168 square feet in area. So here is an elevation of the dwelling as submitted by the applicant, and as you can see, the additional proposed screen porch on the side. So here we have some photos. The rear of the dwelling from the driveway, looking at the existing dwelling from the bottom of the existing stairs, the dwelling from the dock, the existing shoreline of the subject lands, and here you can see it taped off where the proposed screened-in porch is to be located. And then here's just a view of the adjacent lands to the north. So essentially these would be the neighbors that would be on the side of where the proposed screened-in porch is. So as you can see, there is existing mature vegetation. So the majority of the area to provide an increase in gross floor area is located on the side and will not be closer to the water than what currently exists. And the existing front wall of the dwelling will be maintained. The 6 Mile Lake community encourages balanced development located away from the shoreline and promotes a naturalized landscape with little maintenance or site alteration. The existing conditions of the site provide for a relatively steep topography towards the water and sparse mature vegetation along the shoreline. The proposed increase in gross floor area will increase the existing width of the dwelling. However, they are still within the permitted total dwelling width for the current zoning. And it will not increase the overall height of the existing structure and will not be located closer to the water. So the proposed development does conform to the official plan. The proposed development will be similar in visual impact to what exists today, and the opportunity to apply site plan control on the subject lands will enable additional vegetation to be required in the front yard, providing better screening of the existing structure. Staff are in support of the application and believe it meets the 4 tests. The applicant and their agent is here, and if you have any questions for myself.
Thank you, Victoria. Have we had any correspondence on this application?
1 letter of support was received.
Is the applicant present? And would you like to add anything to what Victoria has presented so far?
Both the applicant, the homeowner, and I'm the agent on behalf of the homeowners. I think Victoria did a great job.
Please give us your name and address.
Alex McConnell, Avanti Engineering and Design, Box 240, Oro Station.
And the other people at the microphone?
Rob and Sue Kerr, we're the owners.
Thank you. And your comments, please?
I think Victoria did a great job explaining it. Client's really looking for a screened-in porch just for the earlier seasons. It's pretty buggy here, and they want to be able to enjoy their outdoors a little bit there. And the basement for the storage, the main reason is the height of my client. He hits his head at the moment, so he's looking to drop that down. Also, it's a step into it, so it makes it a little bit easier access for storage as well.
Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address this application? Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments, starting with Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This seems like a reasonable application, and whilst I don't appreciate the same vertical challenges that you do, it makes sense, so I have no problem with this application.
Member Demke?
Thank you. I had the pleasure of talking with the Kerrs when I went on the visit, and it looks like this well planned out, and I see no problem with this.
Member.
I'm just finishing my breakfast, excuse me. Just one question about the storage area. If you could just clarify for me, so this is the basement plan, and this is storage, is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. This room here is currently used for storage, and it is under the 1.8 meters in height, so it's not included in the gross floor area calculation. The application requests to allow that to be increased in height to be a portion of gross floor area.
So, just that portion there?
Just this area here, yes.
So it's the screened-in area plus this. I know you went through this, I just want to sort of, we've had some circumstances where basically storage areas have become part of the residence, and I just want to make sure we're not going down that road again. I think on 6 Mile Lake, as a matter of fact. And so the current basement is considered gross floor area, dwelling space, etc., not storage, is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the remainder of this area here that is hatched out is considered part of livable gross floor area. These two side rooms right now are not. They wish to include this in that calculation. This is going to remain storage and not part of gross floor area. So they came to the township to ask permission to do so, even though the structure is already built.
So the other side we're talking about is more like a crawl space as opposed to a full basement, shall we say? Exactly. Fair enough. Thanks very much, and I think this is just fine.
Member Ferguson.
I also did a site visit, and I want to thank the applicants for clearly marking out where the screen porch was to go. And it was quite obvious then that it certainly isn't obtrusive at all. And I have absolutely no problem with this application.
Member Bocek.
I have one comment and one question. And my comment is, a little buggy is way off kilter. It's a lot buggy. Trust me, I've been up there. My question is, in years past, we had an interim control bylaw on 6 Mile Lake, which addressed the maximum gross floor area, and I believe it was pinned at 275, am I right? 275? So this does not exceed the maximum gross floor area. As a matter of fact, it's under it, so I'm just kind of questioning why we're here and it's not just able to be done without coming to the Committee of Adjustments.
Sure, so through you, Mr. Chair, the reason why this is part of the application is the way that that provision in the bylaw is worded is for lots that are above 4,000 square meters, they can go to a max of 275 or 5% of the total lot area, whichever is more restrictive.
Correct.
So for them, that calculation as of right is 216.4. So that's where they do need to ask for this small part of increase, yeah.
So it's about 500, a little under 500 square feet.
Exactly, yeah.
And most of that will be hidden by converting the storage into livable space.
So I have no problems with this application.
Member Caddo?
No, I have no problem with it. I think you are being very honest with coming to the township and doing what you are doing in your basement and getting approval for it, so I'm in support of it.
Thank you. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay. Question? Question or comment? Carry on.
I hope you enjoy your screened-in veranda. They're great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. I'll read the motion. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A19-34 for 139 Big Rock Road to permit a maximum gross floor area for a dwelling of 260 square meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation protection areas, and required additional plantings in the front yard in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. Do I have a motion for approval? Mr. Demkew, second by Member Caddo. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Our next application is minor variance application A19-35 for 93 Woodland Trail. To the planner, please.
Feels like forever. Okay, so the next application you have in front of you is to permit the construction of a cottage and detached garage. So the cottage will have a height of 8.5 meters, where 8 meters is permitted, and also to permit an increase in the maximum permitted lot coverage to 13.2%, where 10% is permitted, and the subject lands is zoned shoreline residential type 1, and they're permitted 10% lot coverage because they're on the Trent Severn waterway. Sorry, I wrote Pratt's Road. Ignore that. It's 93 Woodland Trail, and it is off of Nicholson Road and Sweets Portage Road. So the subject lands is shown on the screen in red. So the original survey that was submitted with the application that was on the notice showed this proposed cottage, that's the dark black. And the original existing cottage is the red square. Since circulation, the applicant has revised the footprint of the cottage, still requesting the same variances, so the increase in lot coverage and the increase in height. However, they have since reduced the width of the cottage and they have moved it over, and I do have it on the next slide. So the original width, which is shown here, is 22 meters with a gross floor area of 373 square meters. There is no gross floor area restrictions in the SR1 zone in the waterfront community. So since the application has been circulated, they have revised the footprint of the cottage. So as you can see, it has moved over from the interior side lot line, which was at the 5 meters as permitted in the zoning bylaw, and it's now at 26 feet. And the width has been reduced to 14 meters, and they have a gross floor area of 340 square meters as opposed to the 373. And the reason for this was to reduce the amount of vegetation that needed to be cut down. So originally they had to take about 8 mature trees down in this interior side lot line in order to have the dwelling in the footprint that it is. But with moving it over, it allows them to maintain those trees in order to keep that vegetative buffer between the neighboring property. So the intent of the maximum permitted lot coverage is to establish a relationship between the coverage of buildings and the size of a lot in order to ensure a lot is not overdeveloped and in order to maintain a balance between built and natural form. So just to give you an overview of what the subject property looks like, this is the rear of the existing cottage, so coming in off the driveway. The rear and the location of the proposed, because they're expanding towards the back. This is looking down the existing driveway. This is on the east side of the proposed cottage and looking towards the shoreline. So they do have an existing boathouse. It does have plumbing, and that was approved through a previous minor variance. So this is the existing cottage, and as you can see, that change in topography, so that's what's causing the increase in height, so it slopes down towards the shoreline. So this is a view standing in front of the existing cottage, and this will be, again, the location of the proposed cottage. So this is a view to the west along the shoreline. And this is a view from the dock looking towards the existing cottage and the location of the proposed cottage. And another view of that western shoreline, and you can see the neighboring properties. And that west shoreline again. This is a view north out into the bay. A view to the east, so you can see the neighboring boathouse. Another view to the east and the boathouse on the subject lands. And this is it. The proposed garage will be on top of this sloped area behind that setback behind the cottage. And this is standing beside the cottage, again, looking towards that shoreline. And standing in the general location of the proposed garage, looking towards that shoreline. So the garage will be set back behind the existing boathouse. And standing in that garage location, looking northeast. And again, that is the garage location. So this is standing on the existing deck, looking towards that shoreline. So there is some mature trees buffering the visual impact. And another view from that deck to the shoreline. And this is standing beside the cottage, looking towards that western property line. So that vegetation will remain since they have moved the cottage. And another view to the western property line. So that's the area that they will be maintaining that vegetation by moving it over beyond that 5-meter setback. So just to give you an idea of what the cottage is proposed to look like. So due to that slope in the topography, there will be an increase in height that they are proposing of 8.5 meters. So the intent of the height is to limit scale and visual impact of structures and to ensure the waterfront area is protected. The proposed dwelling will not exceed the existing tree canopy, because as you saw, there was significant vegetation along the property lines and there was some mature vegetation along the shoreline. This is a rear, so this is what you would see if you were coming down the driveway. Just to give you an idea of the floor plan, it is 5-bedroom, 3.5 bath. Main floor, and this is the upper floor. And this is the garage. So the garage will have a sleeping cabin in the upper set story of the 2-story garage, and it will comply with the height requirements, which is 5 meters. And then just to give you an idea of that garage, so the square footage of the garage is 840 square feet, with the sleeping cabin complying with that 600 square feet that they are allowed, or 56 square meters. So the proposed dwelling is expanding the existing cottage footprint to the rear. So they are expanding it to the rear of the existing cottage. I'm just going to go back to the survey. And they are proposing to put that garage setback beyond the front yard setback, which is 20 meters for this property, and behind the existing boathouse in order to reduce any visual impact to the shoreline. So as a condition of approval, site plan control will be applied to the subject lands in order to protect the existing vegetation and identify any areas of proposed planting. So a site visit has confirmed that the proposed cottage location is the most appropriate location, and they do comply with that minimum setback of 20 meters, and they do meet their side yard setbacks. So the order of how they will be constructing things is they are hoping to build the cottage or the garage first, so that they do have another property so that they can move their furniture into that while they build their new cottage. Staff are in support of the application, and the owners are here if you have any questions for them or if you have any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Dana. Has there been any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence was received.
Okay. Is the applicant present, and would you care to make comment on this application?
Chair and fellow committee members, thank you for hearing us.
Could I have your name?
My name is William Nickel, and my wife Suzanne. We are permanent residents on Gloucester Pool and have been so for 23 years. We own the adjacent property, 79 Woodland Trail, which is currently up for sale. I am finding as I get older, it has a much it's more difficult for me to navigate. The 93 Woodland Trail, our proposed build, again, will be our permanent residence. It's a flatter property, easier to navigate and negotiate as you get older. We do need a garage in that we have 2 cars and an all-terrain vehicle. They're there in the winter. They need protection from the elements. I don't think there's anything else I need to say at this point in time.
Thank you very much for that. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments, starting with Member Caddo.
Nothing at this point in time.
Okay. Member Bocek?
Yeah, just for the other committee members, I have made quite a few visits up to this property to look at it by water, by land, and traversed from your former or your property you have for sale, which is quite steep, I will admit. The garage is not going to be able to be seen from the water at all. The build is suitable. It's basically being built back from the existing, not closer to the water. And it is very representative of the neighboring properties. We have to remember that Gloucester Pool has no community plan in the official plan. It's within 2 townships, Severn Township and Georgian Bay Township. And if you drive down the lake, you can certainly see the difference of a township that has bylaws to do with building and ones that don't. You'll have 8,000 to 9,000 square foot cottages on one side of the lake and not on the other. So it's quite a contrast, but my feeling is this build and this want and ask, it suits the property, and I'm going to support this.
Thank you.
And also, I took a councillor Bianco up with me for his opinion on it as well too, because there was some concerns I had, and they've all been satisfied.
Thank you very much. Member Ferguson?
Just a couple of quick questions. Is that there's already some sort of living accommodation above the boathouse? Is that
It's not living accommodation. It's a TV and games room. And my wife uses that as a partial art studio. She's an artist, but there's no living accommodations up above. I might also like to make a comment with regard to the height variance that we are requesting. In the middle of the current structure, cottage, there's an outcropping of rock that comes up high, and our builder is concerned about putting the ducting work there where there's enough space. Our ideal is to drop the cottage down a foot to a foot and a half if we can accommodate all the structures underneath, and that would bring us within the, I think, the variance, or the allowed height. If we can't, then that's why we've asked for a potential for the height restriction.
Okay, thank you. Member Cooper?
I'm not having any issue with this at all. I'm curious, though, Councillor Bocek's comment, where are the 9,000 square foot structures? Is that Severn Township or ours?
Severn Township.
Thank you so much.
Member Demke?
Thank you. Yeah, I visited the site. It's well posted pretty well laid out, have no visual impact that I could see will be increased, so I'd be totally supportive.
Member Matthews?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I had a quick visit as well, and I think what's missing on this perspective is that there's quite a large deck and stairs that are currently there, so that the new building really won't be much more than what the existing platform is there, but it's not shown as an actual cottage. So I don't have a problem with this application.
Thank you. I've visited the site as well, and just one question in general I might ask Dana is there anything in our bylaws that addresses or comments on having living quarters in boathouse, garage, and cottage? And let's assume plumbing in each of those. Is there anything that covers multiple sleeping accommodations?
Chair Hill. So our zoning bylaw does not permit washrooms or living quarters in a boathouse. However, this was pre-existing and they did get approval in 2011 in order to have what they have in their boathouse now. As for total living.
Pardon me, Dana, how did they acquire that approval in 2011? Is it by virtue of the building department or planning department or minor variance?
It went through a minor variance to permit plumbing in the existing two-story boathouse, and that was approved.
Okay, thank you.
So that is permitted, and you are permitted to have living space in a detached garage, provided you're in the size requirements for a sleeping cabin. So a detached garage can be 112 square meters, and then you're allowed to have 600 square meters, whether it be on the main floor or the upper second story, for a sleeping cabin, and you can have a washroom in that if you wish, provided your septic has the capacity to handle all of the plumbing, fixture units, and living space on your property.
Yeah, you said 600. I think you meant something different. 600 square feet.
600 square feet for the sleeping cabin.
Yeah.
Did I say meters?
600
Sorry.
square feet.
56 square meters.
Above the garage can be 56.
Yes, so essentially half of your garage can be sleeping cabin if you want it on the upper story or if you want it on the main floor. Whether you can have a bathroom, it will be dependent on your septic, and they're going to be installing a new septic that will have the capacity to handle all of the washrooms, living space, and fixture units that they're proposing on their site. And that will be through the building department.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Okay, with no further questions or comments, I will read the motion. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A19-35 for 93 Woodland Trail to permit an increase of the maximum permitted height of a detached dwelling to 8.3 meters and an increase in the maximum permitted lot coverage to 13.2%, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, the extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation protection areas, and areas of new planting within the front yard in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. That approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. Do I have a motion for approval? Member Bochek, seconded by Member Demkew. All those in favor? The motion is carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
By the way, beautiful painting for the mill town.
Okay. Our next application is minor variance application number A19-36 for 74 Transcanada Bay Road. To the planner, please.
So our next application was submitted by Pat Van de Bosport. I never say that correctly, I apologize. Bosport. So the lands are located at 74 Transcanada Bay Road, which is located on 6 Mile Lake. So the request of this application is to permit the removal of the existing dwelling and accessory structures, or some of the accessory structures, and the construction of a new dwelling pursuant to the 6 Mile Lake residential zone. And this would include a minimum setback to a septic system of 17 meters, which is the existing setback, whereas 30 meters is required. A minimum front yard setback to a dwelling of 7.9 meters, which again is existing, whereas 20 meters is required. A minimum side yard setback to a dwelling of 1 meter, where 5 meters is required. A maximum lot coverage of total lot area of 12.8%, where 8% is permitted. And a maximum gross floor area of 200 square meters, where 190 square meters is permitted. So here we have a location map of the subject lands. They are located in the southwest portion of 6 Mile Lake, just north of Whites Falls Road. So in the official plan, they are designated 6 Mile Lake residential, and in the zoning bylaw, they are zoned 6 Mile Lake residential, the SR6 zone. So here is an approximate aerial of the subject lands. Existing structures on the property include a dwelling, a boathouse, 2 sheds that are currently being used as cabins. So here is the existing site plan of the property. So as you can see here, here's the existing cottage, the 2 accessory structures to the rear, as well as that existing boathouse. And as you can see, the shoreline does wrap around the north and east sides of the property. And so here we have what the applicants are proposing, which, as you can see, essentially the existing front wall of the cottage would be maintained. They are looking to fill in, as you can see here from perspective, this existing area of deck and accessory structures would be filled in for the entire subject dwelling. So the majority, or sorry, all of the proposed addition would be located to the rear of the existing dwelling front wall and also to the side. So no closer to the water at any point along the shoreline. So here we have a few photos of the subject lands. So here is the existing dwelling from the driveway. And as you can see here, the rear of the existing dwelling and one of the 2 accessory sheds and the existing deck on the subject lands. So this is that area to the rear of the existing dwelling that essentially is being proposed to be developed into the dwelling as a whole. So this entire area is proposed to be part of the main dwelling. So here we have a photo of the front of the cottage from the front yard. And here is the existing dock on the east side of the shoreline, as well as the existing shoreline that the cottage fronts onto. And this is a photo of the existing north shoreline, and this is that boathouse and another existing dock structure on the property. And here's just a photo of the dwelling from the dock. So again, the proposal would not permit the addition to go any closer to the water than what currently exists. So the front wall of that cottage would be maintained. And it is also important to note that no variance to dwelling height is included in this application. They are looking to maintain a 1-story dwelling. So here is just a photograph of the adjacent lands to the south of the subject lands. So this would be the property that would be closest to where the proposed area of development would be located. So as you can see, significant mature vegetation does exist. And this is just one more view of, again, that existing rear area to the dwelling of where the expansion to the dwelling is being proposed. So again, taking the existing developed area and just reconfiguring it to be all one structure. Oh, apologize. So the existing built form on the property is visible from the shoreline. The area of the proposed increase in dwelling area is located to the rear and to the side of the existing cottage and is not being proposed to be closer to the water at any point of their shoreline. The 6 Mile Lake community encourages balanced development located away from the shoreline and promotes a naturalized landscape with little maintenance or site alteration. The existing configuration the existing configuration and conditions of the site, so I'm going to pull up the site plan again, as you can see, would be very difficult to meet zoning provisions as it is laid out without any type of variance required at all. So the development proposal does take advantage of existing built form on the subject lands where that deck and accessory structures are located, and the proposal ensures that none of the existing vegetation that's located to the rear or to the north of the property would be impacted by the proposed development. So the proposed development will be similar in visual impact to what exists today, because again, they are willing to maintain, or they are proposing to maintain that existing front wall. As well, the opportunity through this application to apply site plan control on the property will enable additional vegetation to be planted in the front yard, providing better screening than what does currently exist. And for these reasons, staff are in the opinion that the application does meet the 4 tests and do support the approval of the application. The applicants are here if you have any questions for them or myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Is the applicant present, and do you wish to add anything to Victoria's comments?
Morning, Pat Van de Bosport, owner of the property, and this is my wife, Lisa Price. I would only ask, thank you very much, Victoria, you did a great job. We're also not intending to affect the vegetation to the south, I guess that would be. Presently, about 50% of the shoreline is natural. We want to continue to have it that way, if not increase that. Feel very strongly that the design that we've picked melts into the background. I'm not sure. I provided a photograph. I don't know if it's available.
I don't believe it's in the slideshow, no.
I have a hard copy if anyone's interested. We had a graphic designer superimpose it on the current property, and it's and then showed all our neighbors, and we have several letters of support. I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay, thank you very much. Were there any correspondence for this application?
Yes, 1 letter of concern and 9 letters of support were received.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this application? Please come forward and state your name, sir.
My name is Gary Jarvis. I live the property next door, 92 Transcanada Bay Road. The Van de Bosports are excellent neighbors. I'm going to steal one of your comments that this proposal suits the property, and it's unfortunate you can't see the picture that was superimposed by an artist on a lake. This is a very unique property. This property was purchased by a fellow named Bob Ayers, who actually bought the road allowance. And because it's road allowance, you know, restrictions in size, again, he built the basic wood frame house. Again, looking at these numbers, some of these setbacks may look aggressive, but he did the best he could based on what was available to him. And the Van de Bosports have respected that and are not going any closer to the water. They are significantly respect the environment and the way it looks, respect their neighbors. You say you had 9 letters of support. The entire south end of the lake is behind this project, and it again, to repeat the comment, it suits the property. It suits the property exceptionally well. And I really don't have anything more to say. I don't think I actually wrote the letter. That's why I came here to say that. There's another member, again, adjacent to the property. It is well supported by the area, and it's going to look fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to comment on this application? Seeing none. Have we had any applications, any comments? Yeah, you did, just 8 in favor. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir, do you wish to?
Well, I just got one question.
Okay, please give us your name and address.
My name is Smith. I live at 108 Transcanada Bay Road.
And your first name, sir?
Robert.
Robert Smith.
And I'm 2 down from the property we're talking. I just wonder what was the concern and who put it in?
Victoria, can you respond to that?
Mr. Chair, I believe the concern was they just, the setback that's being proposed, sorry, I will go back to the presentation. So as you can see here on the subject lands currently, the septic is located down in here. And so the existing setback to that septic is 17 meters. As part of the application, it was staff's recommendation to include this setback to recognize it in case in future instances, if the applicants ever needed to update their septic system, that they wouldn't have to come back for approval to do so, essentially just recognizing an existing situation. And I believe the note that was sent in by the member of the public was essentially just asking, could this be potentially a bit larger than the 17 proposed? But that is the intent of why it's being asked, is to essentially just recognize the existing septic system in case it ever needed to be rebuilt.
Is the, so there's no part of this application that is going to rebuild the septic at this point then? It's just to identify where it is?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe there is no intent to rebuild the septic or need for expansion at this time. It is just a matter of, it was planning staff's suggestion to the applicant that it would be a good idea, given the fact that if ever in the future they wanted to rebuild.
Okay, and I would just mention, Mr. Smith, that any letters that are received in regard to any of these applications are part of the public information. If you want a copy of that, just send a letter or send an email or a phone call or speak to Lauren Arsenault, who's our Secretary Treasurer, and she'd be happy to give you a copy of that or email it to you, whatever you like. So it's not a problem.
So am I to understand, just the planning department is wondering if that's going to be bigger or moved, or is it an individual?
No, I believe what Victoria had mentioned is that they were wanting to make sure that the location of the septic tank is a part of this application so that it's recorded on their title. And so if there's any need to update that in the future, there's no need to come back with another minor variance in order to justify the location of where the septic tank is.
Thank you.
Okay with that?
No further questions.
All right. Anyone else, any other members of the public wish to comment on this application? Okay, then seeing none, I'll bring the application before the committee for questions or comments, starting with Member Matthews.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Victoria, just so I can summarize in my own mind, you've covered it. The septic system is not moving. You're just making it legal and on title. The front yard setback is not changing. It's staying exactly the way it is right now.
Correct.
The side yard setback is 1 meter, but currently it looks like it's probably right on the line. So if anything, there's a small net improvement on that aspect.
Correct.
I'm curious on the lot coverage, because you say we're going to 12.8 where 8 is permitted. What is the current coverage?
Yep. The current lot coverage, as told by the surveyor, is 6.69%. So that would be the cottage, the sheds, and the boathouse that would be included in that. So the increase that's being proposed, a large part of that is essentially filling this area in with a structure versus the deck, and that's where that jump.
So where that deck is now is not considered as lot coverage because
Exactly.
it's below the 1.2. So
Exactly.
really the footprint isn't changing much, just the lot coverage
The number. Yeah.
number is. Okay.
Exactly.
And I think it's marvelous that you've talked with your neighbors and you've got such great support. So I have no issue with this application.
Thank you very much. Member Demke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I visited, appropriately posted that something was going on. I assume the red lines were the outline. So I had a kind of just a question more than anything. It looks like it's coming right through where the beach house is, but it's just coming through and the beach house is going?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
The red lines were a bit of poetic license on my part, but it was staked as well.
Okay, yeah, it looked like the way it was coming through was part of that would go, but maybe not the front of the beach house, but.
No,
I think
it
the
all
question-
goes.
The question's been answered there. And along the, I'm not sure which side it is, it looks like the red line runs along some trees behind where the main building is, where it looked like the red line was running right against some trees. Is that
There are 3 trees affected.
And they gonna go out?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's the only thing I could see that something was gonna disappear, but it certainly doesn't affect anything, so I'm fine with that, thank you.
Member Cooper?
One question, and then one technical question, I guess. Did you say the lot coverage is presently 6.6%? Is that what you said?
Through you, Mr. Chair, based on the survey, yes, 6.69%, yes.
So we're going 6.9, and we're going from 6.69 to 12.8.
That is correct.
From a technical perspective,
Yep.
I see there's quite a number of matters that are being brought forward, and I realize that some of them are just acknowledging things like the septic system, but nevertheless, can you explain to me why this wouldn't have come to the Planning Council as opposed to the Committee of Adjustment, given the number of matters? They seem like a lot, which typically means that it comes to the Planning Council. And secondly, the magnitude, the lot coverage has gone from 6.69 to 12.8%, which typically we would see at the Planning Council. Can you explain the technical aspect of that? Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the application before you was applied by the applicants through a minor variance process, through pre-consultation with planning staff. It was never suggested by myself as planning staff that it go through the zoning bylaw amendment process, as I did not feel that it was needed to do so based on, and I agree, yes, the lot coverage number itself seems a lot, just as other applications today we've seen have been over that. But in the sense of the actual gross floor area that's being proposed here is very minor, and taking into consideration the existing property itself and the restrictions of that, planning staff felt that they were able to support it at that level, and that's why it is before you today.
Member Ferguson.
Given the fact that I know we're not moving any further forward, but the new structure will only be 26 feet from the water, and you've acknowledged in your report that there is very little visual coverage in front of the cottage, it would have been great to have had some renderings or drawings of what the new cottage is going to look like, so that we would have a better idea of the view from the canoe.
So through you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize it wasn't in my original PowerPoint. This was provided by the applicant. So as you can see, this is the north point that I was illustrating, that there is not a lot of mature vegetation. The remainder of the property, as you can see here along the north shore, does have very heavy vegetation that exists. So this is a general artist rendering of what the applicants are proposing from the water, if that hopefully helps you visualize.
Not much.
Can you zoom?
Not much.
Victoria, could you zoom in on that a little bit, please?
That help?
Yeah, a little bit more. So that indicates that a question that was going to come up is, so the existing structures that are there will be completely removed and replaced with this? Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, you are correct. So the resulting structures on the property, if this application were to be approved, would be the dwelling and the boathouse and the docks. So those accessory structures would not be permitted, nor would any other structures be permitted without further planning approval in the future.
I just have another quick question, and the height now
Yes.
will be no higher than what currently exists?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the intent in the sense of it being a one-level structure is the same as what currently exists. There haven't been final plans yet in the sense of height, but it is the applicant's intent to stay within the permitted height in the zoning bylaw, and they are allowed an extra 1 meter of height given their location, and they believe that they can be within that, so it's not part of the application.
Thank you.
Member Bocek.
Well, I'm glad you brought the rendering because I envisioned this as being a one-story with maybe a walkout basement looking like a grain tower, which is not what the people of 6 Mile Lake like. So great. I have no issues with the way it stands there.
Member Caddo?
No issues. I agree with the the setback, there's a bit of an encroachment on the road allowance, and they're kind of cleaning that up. And as far as the septic bed, where else are you going to put it? You can't get any close farther away, so that letter of concern, I think, pretty much it can go in one spot, and that's it. Anyways, I approve it.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask just a quick question? What will be the square footage of the new structure upon completion?
Sure, so the proposal is 200, or I apologize, I want to clarify. The applicant's proposed to meet the 190 square meters that is allowed. Through my review of just kind of the general idea of what they're proposing, I suggested that they add an additional 10 square meters to up to the 200 to allow them, because they are not finalized on their building plans yet, if they want to add a little, screen porch to the back, et cetera, that they wouldn't have to come back for 10 square meters of gross floor area.
So we're talking 2,400 square feet, somewhere in that vicinity? 2,000? Thank you very much. That's certainly not excessive when you see what else is going on the lake.
Yeah, just a couple of final questions, and Victoria, when a proposal comes forward, is there anything in the bylaws that refers to the exterior appearance, in specific the color, or is that entirely up to the applicant?
Mr. Chair, the township does not have any urban design guidelines or anything of that sort to allow us to require a structure to look a certain way or be built by certain materials. As long as it meets the building code, they are able to visually build what they please.
Okay, and one other question then. The application before us is approving a structure that is per the footprint that you've lined out, and you're saying it's going to be within the height requirement. And so at this point, as long as the construction proceeds and meets the building code, the style, the shape, color, all that kind of stuff is entirely up to the applicant. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Chair, yes. As long the footprint that you see here, the proposed A footprint, they would be required to stay within that footprint if this application were to be approved. And anything other than that, when it comes to, like you said, materials or anything, as long as they meet building code, planning is not able to impose any type of, nor would we suggest to impose any type of visual requirements for what they were to build.
Okay, and just one final question then. If we're looking at that drawing, it has some dimensions on it. Would there need to be, would a survey need to be presented to the building department that has the exact dimensions on it? In more dimensions than what are shown in that drawing?
Mr. Chair, yes, that's a great question. So this proposed structure was consulted, and I did speak to the surveyor myself in order to obtain that side yard setback. When it comes to the exact footprint of the structure, the applicants are aware that they will need to have the surveyor pin that on prior to submitting for building permits, and that's when planning will be able to ensure that they are within, if this were to be approved, they are within that footprint that committee allowed.
Okay, so we're if this were approved, then those setbacks would be allowed, and then you just make sure this development takes place. All right, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, having read that, I will read the motion, or is there, or could I have a motion for approval? Moved by Member Ferguson, second by Member Caddo. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A19-36 for 74 Transcanada Bay Road to permit the removal of the existing dwelling and construction of a new dwelling with a minimum setback to a septic system of 17 meters, a minimum front yard setback to a dwelling of 7.9 meters, a minimum side yard setback to a dwelling of 1.0 meters, a maximum lot coverage, total lot area of 12.8%, and a maximum gross floor area of 200 square meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan. extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation protection areas, and the required additional plantings in the front yard in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And C, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the, the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now, is there a bunch of other stuff? Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of our previous meeting? Moved by member Demke, seconded by member Cooper. All those in favor? All those in favor? Motion is carried. It is now 12:15, September 13, 2019. Could I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Moved by member Matthews, seconded by member Cooper. All those in favor? The motion is carried.
We're adjourned?
We are officially adjourned until
Peter,
October the 3rd,
need your signature
or
on these.
at the call of the chair. Thank you. You are excused.
Thank you, sir. You're excused.
No, you're not excused until I get your signatures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Always miles away.